After the great calamity, the world order was reshaped. Alien beasts roared atop the ruins while human civilization struggled to survive in the cracks. In this chaotic age, population was the foundation. Everyone bore the duty to procreate. The greater one's ability, the greater one's obligation to care for more women and bear more offspring. Chen, about to turn 21, had reached the deadline for the Dragon Nation's mandatory marriage law. If he still did not register for marriage, the state would forcibly assign him a wife. A poor man like Chen had no girl willing to marry him, so he could only accept the arrangement. In the end, his sister's beautiful schoolmate became his legal wife. Fortunately, the system activated. With this stroke of fortune, Chen's life began to change drastically. Blue Star. Year 108 of the Cataclysm. Outer 7th District, Lower Ditch Lane. This was a slum filled with despair and struggle. Everywhere the eye could see were rusted mottled metal shacks. Pipes crisscrossed the walls, dripping filthy liquid from time to time, pooling into foul puddles on the ground. Under the dim street lamp at the alley entrance, several ragged, numb-faced residents huddled in a corner, staring blankly at the gloomy sky. In this era, living itself was a luxury. At this moment, deep in Lower Ditch Lane, inside a narrow shack almost swallowed by darkness, a slightly thin young man carefully placed a vial glowing with faint blue light onto the worn wooden table. Chen, age 20, was an ordinary orphan in this slum. His gaze was unusually calm, carrying a hint of fierceness that did not match his age. Years earlier, Chen's parents had died during a resource-gathering expedition in an uninhabited zone, leaving only him and his young sister Tong to depend on each other. The shack's furnishings were extremely bare, nothing but 2 plank beds that creaked with every turn, 1 table and 2 chairs. The walls were patched together from salvaged scrap metal gaps stuffed with rags to barely keep out the wind. His sister Tong sat on the edge of the bed holding an old book with a badly worn cover, reading seriously under the dim light of a low-wattage energy-saving lamp on the table. She looked a few years younger than Chen, fair-skinned, wearing an old-school uniform with a lively intelligence between her brows. Tong was Chen's only warmth and concern in this world. Chen watched his sister's earnest profile, his eyes full of tenderness, but it was soon replaced by a heavy resolve. He walked over to his sister, his raised hand pausing for a moment before gently patting her shoulder. Tong. Tong looked up, saw her brother's serious expression, and doubt flickered in her eyes. Brother, what's wrong? Chen paused, then pushed the blue potion on the table toward her. This. Looking at the mysterious glowing vial in the dim light, Tong's face paled as a suspicion rose in her heart. Brother, you don't mean to. Chen nodded, his voice unusually firm. Tong, our savings are almost gone. Your tuition and our daily expenses. I can't support them by doing odd jobs at the factory. You know too, surviving in this world, living a little better is too hard. And I'm almost 21. You know the rules. The government will soon assign me a marriage partner, and then there'll be one more mouth to feed. If I can successfully awaken as an awakened and hunt beasts for materials, I can make a lot of money. This is our only chance. It can keep you in school and get us out of this damn shack. The psionic potion. After taking it, a person had a certain chance to break the shackles of mortality and gain strength, speed, perception, or recovery far beyond ordinary humans, becoming a warrior known as an awakened. But becoming an awakened was not that simple. The psionic potion itself was expensive enough to drain an entire poor family, and the vial in Chen's hand had nearly used up his savings. The awakening process carried extreme risks. Failure might collapse the body or kill on the spot. There was another auxiliary potion called the symbiotic potion, which could be taken with the psionic potion to avoid the risk of death after failure. Even if it failed, the body would not collapse. But that thing's price was astronomical. Chen could not afford it. Tong's eyes reddened instantly. She grabbed Chen's arm, her voice choked with tears. Brother, no, it's too dangerous. I heard that many people died after drinking the potion. Even if you succeed, going outside to hunt beasts is like 9 deaths out of 10. I don't want you to become an awakened. We can save money. I'll quit school while go work. Nonsense. Chen cut her off, his tone sharp. School is your only way out. Have you forgotten how Mom and Dad died? They wanted us to live like human beings. How could I let you live that kind of life? Seeing his sister frightened, he softened his tone and gently wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Tong, trust me. I will succeed. Think about it. Once I become an awakened, we'll never have to live in this drafty hellhole again. I'll move you to a safe, clean house, and you can study at a better school. No more fear in this broken place. Pointing at the vial, Chen's eyes burned with longing. This vial used up all our savings. It is our only hope. Tong looked at her brother's almost obsessive eyes and knew that nothing she said could change his decision. She only clung tightly to her brother's arm, burying her face in his sleeve, tears silently soaking his clothes. Chen gently patted her back and said softly, "Don't be afraid, Tong. I'll be fine. I definitely will be. Once I become an awakened, no one will ever dare bully us. After comforting his sister, Chen picked up the faint blue vial. The cold glass tube pressed against his palm, as if he were holding his own fate. Succeed and he would leap over the dragon gate, and change his life. Fail and all would be lost, and his sister would lose her last support. There was no turning back. He unscrewed the cap, and a slightly sweet metallic smell wafted out. Chen hesitated no longer. He tilted his head back and drank the entire vial in one go. At first the potion in his throat had no unusual taste, like drinking a slightly cool liquid. But only seconds later an indescribable heat erupted from his stomach and swept through his limbs and bones. Ugh! The intense pain forced a muffled groan from Chen. He felt as if his blood vessels were about to burst, his bones grinding violently, his muscle fibers torn and reknit by a berserk force. His skin visibly flushed red. Blue veins bulged and sweat poured down like streams, instantly soaking his clothes. Darkness surged before his eyes. His consciousness began to blur as countless chaotic images and noises slammed into his mind. Brother! Tong screamed in fright and rushed forward to support the tottering Chen, but was driven back by the incredible heat radiating from him. Just as Chen felt he was about to be torn apart by the raging power, and his consciousness was about to sink into endless darkness, lines of faintly glowing text appeared in the void before his eyes. Reconstructing, awakening hunter. Body modification in progress. Modification successful. Level LV. 30 awakened ability, gravity, manipulation. Hint: killing beasts grants experience points and energy points. Energy points can be used to exchange for items. Chen's unfocused pupils instantly sharpened. This? What is this? Was he dreaming? He had never heard of anyone experiencing this phenomenon when awakening their ability. The potion manual didn't mention this. But the agonizing pain that had nearly torn him apart receded like a tide with the appearance of the text, replaced by an unprecedented power flooding every cell of his body. Chen could clearly feel his body become incredibly light, every muscle brimming with power, and his 5 senses sharpened to an abnormal degree. He could even hear the faint snoring from the neighboring shack. It worked. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. How I knew it was you, kid. Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do? But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Chen's spine. He countered, Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it. Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off. Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers. Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what? Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing. Listening to his rambling, Chen finally spoke up slowly. Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there? Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu? Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D-rank awakened. This guy might even be C-rank already. Did he come alone, or? Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C rank. More than enough to handle you. C rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Gu Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Gu Chen to lead the way. Gu Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Gu Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Gu Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Gu Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now, was it a spatial ability? Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Gu Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Gu Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. In the testing chamber, a waist-high metallic cylinder stood at the center, its surface polished to an impeccable sheen, faintly reflecting the outline of the ceiling lights above. Resting atop the cylinder was a crystal ball the size of a human head. A voice tinged with a hint of weariness echoed from behind the thick, blast-proof glass wall. Step over there into that circle. The staff member responsible for guidance pointed through the glass at a circular area marked with faded yellow paint on the floor before the metal platform. Place your right hand on the testing orb. Don't get all nervous. It's just a test, it won't kill you. Gu Chen walked over to the designated area, as instructed. Inside his chest, his heart pounded loudly, his blood seemingly racing along with it. How could he not be nervous? His heartbeat was anything but calm, contrary to what the staff member had said. Gu Chen took a deep breath, slowly raised his right hand, and gently placed his palm upon the icy surface of the crystal ball. The touch was unexpectedly cold, like grasping a piece of ice. That chill seeped through his palm, pierced his skin, and surged rapidly up his arm along its meridians. The very instant his palm made full contact with the crystal ball, the dormant crystal ball erupted with a blazing, intense light. It began as a soft yet commanding white light, swallowing all shadows within the room, casting walls, floor, and even Gu Chen himself in a stark pale glow. Immediately after, a low hum resonated from within the crystal ball, its volume and frequency escalating sharply. The white light lost its softness, becoming blinding and fierce. The large screen mounted on the wall flickered to life, and a crude progress bar began to surge upwards at a frantic pace. 1, 15, 38. Gu Chen distinctly felt a strange energy pouring from the crystal ball into his arm, coursing through his entire body. The sensation was both agonizing and laced with an indescribably peculiar numbness. Behind the glass wall, the previously bored staff member snapped to attention, his eyes locking onto the soaring progress bar on the screen. A flicker of astonishment crossed his usually impassive face. F rank. It's full. Still rising, he muttered under his breath, almost subconsciously. For the dregs of Outer Sector 7, merely filling the F rank bar was considered a stroke of luck. Yet the progress bar on the screen upon reaching the top of F rank showed no signs of stopping. With ferocious momentum, it burst through that symbolic boundary and continued its climb. It's still climbing. Still climbing. E rank is full too. This The staff member's eyes widened further. His breathing grew heavy, the last trace of indifference on his face replaced by a grave seriousness. Even before his words had fully faded, the progress bar on the screen hit its peak, once more smashing violently through the E-rank threshold. Hum. The hum escalated into a roar, the white light blazing to an almost unbearable intensity. D rank. The staff member exclaimed in shock. An initial D rank awakened in this godforsaken dump of Outer Sector 7. You'd be lucky to see one in a whole year. The intense light and roaring sound persisted for about 10-odd seconds before gradually receding. Eventually the radiance within the crystal ball subsided, returning to its initial dormant state. Only then did Chen feel the strange sensation in his arm begin to fade, leaving behind a slight numbness. He looked up at the staff member behind the glass wall. The man was staring at him with an envious gaze. The test result. D rank. Congratulations, Mr. Chen. The staff member's voice was noticeably excited. Chen felt an immense wave of relief wash over him. D rank. Far better than he had ever anticipated. For an awakened, the initial rank was of paramount importance. It not only determined the height of your starting point, but also largely dictated the ceiling of your future potential. This initial rank was firstly related to one's own body. The more perfect the reaction between one's genes and the reagent, the higher the starting point of the awakening typically was. Secondly, it was intrinsically linked to the spiritual energy reagent consumed. Spiritual energy reagents, to put it bluntly, were concoctions refined from the blood of aberrant beasts. Different aberrant beasts possessed wildly varying energy characteristics. Reagents crafted from the blood of powerful rare aberrant species naturally yielded exceptional results, better able to stimulate the human potential and propel the consumer to great heights. But the problem was which of the high-tier aberrant species was easy to mess with. Hunting them required payment in blood, and the technology and equipment for creating high-grade reagents were tightly controlled by the lofty major powers. The cost. It wasn't something that could be measured in money. Calling it an astronomical sum would be an insult to the word. In a poverty-stricken district like Outer Sector 7, scraping by on the edge of survival, the spiritual energy reagents one could obtain were almost always shoddy products made from the lowest grade aberrant beasts. Just surviving the consumption without becoming a cripple was something to be grateful for. That was the harsh reality. In Outer Sector 7, over 90% of awakened had an initial rank of F, destined to be cannon fodder. Those who reached E rank were considered to have ancestors burning incense for them, viewed as promising prospects that every team scrambled to recruit. As for D rank, in the entire history of Outer Sector 7, seeing a single individual with an initial D rank in a whole year was rarer than finding an unexpired can of food in a garbage dump. The birth of every D rank awakened stirred up quite a commotion in the Outer Sector 7 Aberrant Management Bureau. No wonder this staff member, accustomed to seeing F ranks and occasionally marveling at E ranks, was so taken aback. The staff member rubbed his hands together, his tone becoming exceptionally polite. Mr. Chen, with your aptitude you might even become an A rank awakened in the future. If you step out now, any organization in our Outer Sector 7 would be fighting to have you. How about it? Need me to introduce you to some of the more renowned and well-compensated organizations in our district? Like the Red Scorpions or the Sand Eagles. I'm familiar with them. I can guarantee you'll be well taken care of. Every successful awakened he referred to an organization earned him a referral fee from that organization. An F rank might just get him a few drinks of cheap liquor, but a D rank, that commission would be enough to keep him comfortable for a good long, while perhaps even allow him to move to a slightly better place. Chen listened to the man's pitch, his heart largely unmoved. D rank. Good. But this was only the beginning. As for joining an organization, he didn't want to be tied down to any single faction so soon. The waters of Outer Sector 7 ran deep, and one wrong step would lead to endless troubles. If he truly needed help, he could just find a temporary team. Right now he was more concerned with the benefits his D rank status would confer. Not for now, thanks. Chen's voice carried a newfound confidence. He asked directly, where should I go to handle the procedures? To receive my credentials and the reward money. Oh, right. Yes. Look at me. I was just so happy for you. Go out, turn right, and follow the corridor to the end. You'll see the service window. They'll handle the rest of the registration process there, and you can get your awakened credentials and the government reward money. The staff member gestured vaguely in the right direction. Chen nodded and turned to leave. Following the staff member's directions, he soon spotted several windows at the end of the corridor. There were a few people scattered in line in front of the windows. The subsequent process went exceptionally smoothly. Due to his D rank status, the clerk even displayed a hint of deference. Identity verification, information entry, fingerprint, and palm print scanning, iris authentication. The entire standardized procedure took less than 10 minutes. Finally, a card with a metallic sheen was respectfully presented to Chen by the clerk behind the window, using both hands. On the front of the card was Gu Chen's portrait with his name Gu Chen below it along with a unique identification number. In the most prominent position beneath his name 4 characters were boldly emboldened D rank awakened. The back of the card was covered in dense fine print of precautions. Gu Chen couldn't be bothered to read it. Mr. Gu Chen, this is your awakened credential. Please keep it safe. From this moment on you are formally bound by the Dragon Nation Awakened Protection and Management Act and are entitled to all the rights and welfare it grants to awakened individuals. Additionally, according to the Dragon Nation's special incentive policy for newly awakened individuals in Outer Sector 7, as a D rank awakened you are entitled to a one-time initial reward of 30,000 yuan. The funds have been transferred to your personal account as per regulations. Please verify. The clerk stated this in a routine business-like manner. This money was a means for the Dragon Nation to encourage and absorb awakened power. Gu Chen walked over to a nearby self-service machine, inserted his bank card, and checked his balance. When he saw the 400 in the balance field had changed to 30,400, his breath involuntarily hitched for a moment. 30,000 yuan. In Outer Sector 7, for a bottom-tier resident like him who constantly struggled to make ends meet and would risk his life for a few hundred yuan, this was an enormous sum, enough to support him for a considerable time while also improving his living standards. He could afford a decent set of gear, buy some medical supplies, and move out of his current shack. Gu Chen tucked the awakened credential into his inner pocket, thanked the clerk, turned, and strode away. The afternoon sun carried a faint warmth. Gu Chen looked up at the gloomy, overcast sky. The sky of Outer Sector 7 seemed perpetually stuck in this gray hue. But the trajectory of his life had already shifted. With this Gu Chen, the ordinary resident of Outer Sector 7, that identity was now a thing of the past. Standing here now was Gu Chen, a D rank awakened registered with the Dragon Nation. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. How I knew it was you, kid. Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do? But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chen's spine. He countered, Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it. Gu Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off. Captain Wu listened, nodding, occasionally a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D rank awakened like you could take on a B rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers. Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what? Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing. Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there? Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu? Gu Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Gu Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D rank awakened. This guy might even be C rank already. Did he come alone, or? Gu Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Gu Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C rank. More than enough to handle you. C rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Chen to lead the way. Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now, was it a spatial ability? Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. Both men radiated faint energy fluctuations, unmistakably awakened as well. The woman had put up a fight, but she was clearly outnumbered, having already taken several hits with a thin trickle of blood seeping from the corner of her lips. One of the men, a scar-faced brute, sneered, "Little missy, be smart about this. Hand over the money you made from selling those furs, and we'll let you go easy. Don't you know the rules? When you step into someone else's territory, you pay your respects." The other, a lanky fellow, added with a sinister tone, "Don't be ungrateful, bitch. We're just after your cash. Keep being stubborn, and you'll piss us off. Then it won't just be about losing your money. Haha, that smooth, fair skin of yours." His gaze roamed over her body unabashedly. The woman bit her lower lip hard, clutching a short dagger. "Don't you dare. That money, I earned it with my life." "Earn with your life?" The scar-faced man burst into raucous laughter as if he'd just heard the funniest joke. "Once it's in our hands, it's our spending money, boy. Enough talk. Get her. Teach her a lesson." With that, the two of them closed in again, clearly ready to use serious force. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. In the past, the Chen who could barely protect himself would likely have chosen to look the other way and slip away quietly. Better to avoid trouble than to court it, and once you got entangled in it, it was nearly impossible to shake off. But today, he discreetly observed the three-way scuffle. The two men's energy fluctuations were weak, suggesting E-rank awakened. The woman seemed to be E-rank as well, and being suppressed by the combined assault of the two, her defeat was only a matter of time. And he was a D-rank. Dealing with these two thugs shouldn't be a problem, right? Besides, Chen needed real combat to gauge his newfound abilities. These two would make perfect practice targets. Finally, he took a step forward, slipping into the alley without a sound. No words, no warning. Gravity domination, activate. The ground beneath the scar-faced man suddenly gave way, forming a small pit that made him lose his footing. Caught off guard, he stumbled, leaving himself wide open. The woman reacted swiftly, seizing this golden opportunity. She twisted her body and with reckless abandon drove a powerful kick straight into the scar-faced man's abdomen. "Arg!" The scar-faced man cried out in pain, doubling over and stumbling back several steps, clutching his stomach. "Who?" The lanky man whipped his head around, spotting Chen's sudden appearance. His reflexes were quick. He raised his right palm, and a visible pale green energy orb shot towards Chen with a howl. "Damn it!" Chen cursed inwardly. His lack of combat experience made him flustered for a split second. The attack was faster than he'd anticipated. Too late to dodge. He instinctively crossed his arms in front of him. Bam! The energy orb slammed solidly into his forearms, the sheer impact forcing him back several steps before he crashed into the cold wall with a dull thud. Fortunately, the protective gear he had just purchased proved its worth. The tough leather and the inner vest's cushioning layer absorbed most of the impact, minimizing the damage. Shit. Seeing his attack fail, the lanky man's eyes turned even more vicious. A second energy orb began to condense, hurtling towards Gu Chun, who had just managed to steady himself. This time Gu Chun was ready. A fall into a pit again in your wit. Gravity domination, self-gravity reduction. While he couldn't apply gravity manipulation to other awakened, he could certainly do so to himself. A strange sensation of weightlessness enveloped him instantly, his body feeling as light as a feather. He pushed off the ground with his toes, and like a phantom, he darted sideways with a speed far beyond that of an ordinary person. Whooshed! The green energy orb flew past mere inches from his clothes and smashed violently into the wall behind him. What a... A flicker of terror crossed the lanky man's eyes. But Gu Chun didn't give him a chance to attack again. While evading the attack, Gu Chun used the incredible speed granted by his gravity reduction to close the distance between them in an instant, sending the lanky man flying with a single punch. Within about 2 minutes, Gu Chun and the woman had successfully subdued both men, sending them crashing to the ground. WH. Who the hell are you? The scar-faced man stammered, his bravado crumbling. Gu Chun didn't answer, merely watching him with a wary gaze. The woman also took the opportunity to put more distance between herself and the downed men, looking at Gu Chun with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. The scar-faced man knew they had bitten off more than they could chew. Glancing at his groaning partner on the ground, he gritted his teeth and conceded, "Fine, you win. Let's get out of here." With that, he helped the lanky man to his feet, and the two of them, supporting each other, hurried out of the alley without looking back. Gu Chun silently watched them disappear, making no move to pursue or deliver a finishing blow. Killing them. Easier than breathing. But what about the consequences? Out in the outer 7th District, minor scuffles between awakened were usually overlooked by the Awakened Management Bureau as long as things didn't get too out of hand. But once a death occurred, the Bureau would launch a full investigation. He had a home now, a sister to protect. He didn't want and couldn't afford such an inescapable entanglement. Unless he could be truly clean, leaving no trace whatsoever. And now was clearly not the time. Silence returned to the alley. The woman walked up to Gu Chun, her face still etched with lingering fear, and bowed deeply in gratitude. "Thank you so much for your help. My name is Wang Jiai. I am deeply indebted to you." Wang Jiai. Gu Chun waved his hand dismissively, his tone flat. It was nothing. He glanced at the blood at the corner of her mouth and her slightly disheveled clothes. "Are you alright? Are you badly hurt?" "I'm fine, just some superficial wounds. It's nothing serious." Wang Jiai shook her head, wiping the blood from her lips with her sleeve. "I came from the outer 9th District. I heard prices were better here, so I thought I'd try my luck. I didn't expect." She gave a bitter smile. "I almost lost everything plus my life." Gu Chun nodded. He could understand. The outer 7th District had never been friendly to outsiders. "Be more careful in the future." Gu Chun said, "This isn't a good place." "I understand. I really owe you one this time." Wang Jiai thanked him sincerely again. "What's your name?" "I will surely repay you one day." Gu Chun. "No repayment is necessary." Gu Chun sidestepped, preparing to leave. "I have things to do. I must be going now." He had helped half to test his own power, and half perhaps to heat a faint stirring of compassion deep within his heart. Nothing more. With that, Gu Chun didn't linger, and walked straight out of the alley, heading towards the Marriage Management Bureau, leaving Wang Jiai standing there staring blankly at his retreating figure. This incident hadn't delayed him much, and he arrived at the Marriage Management Bureau just before the matching session began. Standing before the main gate, Gu Chun paused to take in the sight. The building wasn't particularly grand. Its gray-white exterior walls even bore the faint marks of weathering and erosion. For years, humanity had been locked in relentless warfare against aberrant beasts. The brutal conflict had caused a sharp decline in the population, and among those lost men, who bore the brunt of the fighting, were now vastly outnumbered by women. To ensure the survival of the species and preserve the fragile embers of civilization, the Dragon Nation had enacted marriage policies decades ago. Every man and woman was permitted to marry upon reaching 18, but no later than their 20th birthday. Should one fail to find a suitable partner within that time frame, they were obligated to register at their local marriage administration bureau, where the authorities would arrange a match on their behalf. Anyone who dared to delay further and remain single past the age of 21 would face not only exorbitant fines, but also the looming threat of forced labor and severe legal repercussions. Gu Chun had no intention of ending up in such a predicament. Approaching 21, he had visited the Marriage Administration Bureau the previous week to schedule an appointment. Today was the day the Bureau had summoned him for the official matching process. The Bureau's main hall was crowded, filled mostly with young people around his age, some wearing expressions of nervous anticipation, others looking utterly indifferent. After confirming his identity at the reception desk, a uniformed staff member soon approached him. "Mr. Gu Chun, please follow me." The staff member's voice was calm, as though long accustomed to such scenes. Gu Chen nodded and followed the staff member into a group of other young men also awaiting their matches. There were over 20 of them, all visibly uneasy, their gazes darting around the room or murmuring quietly with those they knew. The staff led them down a long corridor, its walls adorned with propaganda posters, slogans encouraging childbirth and national defense alongside vivid depictions of humans battling aberrant beasts. Without pausing, the staff member began explaining the day's matching rules in a steady, measured tone. Everyone, today is your marriage matching day. Let me briefly go over the rules. The staff member's voice echoed through the corridor. To maximize efficiency, the matching process will employ a compulsory mechanism. Compulsory mechanism. Someone in the crowd couldn't help but mutter. But only that one person spoke. The rest remained silent, clearly having known all along. Ignoring the question, the staff member continued, the compulsory mechanism means that once a candidate is selected, the chosen party is not permitted to refuse. This is to avoid unnecessary complications and wasted time, ensuring every eligible citizen completes their marriage registration promptly. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd at these words. Not being allowed to refuse meant one's fate could very well rest in another's hands. Though the rule was overbearing, it was an unavoidable measure in these extraordinary times. The staff member paused, sweeping his gaze over the group, then continued. As for who gets to be the selector and who must be the selected, that is determined entirely by the individual's awakened rank. Awakened were the backbone of humanity's resistance against the beasts, naturally enjoying higher social status and priority. In a pairing, the party with the higher awakened rank automatically gains the right of first selection. The one with the higher rank gets to choose first. And what if the ranks are equal? Or if neither is awakened? A slender, slightly frail young man couldn't help but ask. The staff member replied, then priority is determined by the order in which each registered and scheduled at the Marriage Administration Bureau. Those who registered earlier get to choose first. Hearing this, Gu Chen's heart stirred slightly. Just moments ago, while queuing to confirm his identity, the Bureau's system terminal had briefly displayed basic information for the men in his batch. Those specific abilities were hidden for privacy. Awakened ranks were clearly marked. Gu Chen distinctly remembered being the only D rank awakened among them, the highest ranked male in this entire group. While a D rank wasn't exactly top tier in a compulsory matching setting where everyone was young, it was a considerably high standing. As long as no woman arriving today held an awakened rank above D, Gu Chen would possess the right to make the very first selection. This advantage was undeniably a tremendous boon. Gu Chen could sense the emotions swirling around him, some laced with worry, others with confidence. Everyone understood exactly what the priority selection meant. It meant you could choose from among all eligible candidates the one you found most satisfactory. Perhaps it was someone who was also awakened, a partner capable of fighting alongside you, or someone beautiful and gentle, bringing comfort to daily life, or perhaps someone from a decent family easing the burdens of the future. Those who chose later, however, would find their options steadily dwindling. By the time the last few took their turn, they would often be left to reluctantly accept one of the so-called leftovers, those passed over by everyone before them. Such was reality, cruel, yet starkly direct. Lost in thought, Gu Chen noticed the line had come to a halt before a large door at the corridor's end. The door bore no markings. The staff member stepped forward, swiped a magnetic card across the access panel, and with a soft beep, the door slid open, revealing the scene beyond. It was a spacious room arranged like a temporary assembly hall. At the far end, another group was visible, an entire line of women. The staff member turned and gestured for Gu Chen and the others to enter. All right, everyone, please step inside. The matching is about to begin. Gu Chen straightened his slightly wrinkled collar and, carried by the flow of the crowd, stepped into the room that would decide his future partner. Bright lights flooded the room, rendering everything in sharp clarity. Across from them, some 20-odd young women stood in a row, their gazes fixed squarely on the men who had just entered. Within the spacious chamber, the girls stood with varied emotions, some tense, some filled with anticipation. Amidst the crowd, Ran Wenwen's figure appeared particularly frail, standing awkwardly as her fingers unconsciously twisted the hem of her clothes. Today she wore her academy-style uniform. Her upper body was clad in a pristine white shirt with a slender black tie knotted at the collar, layered beneath a deep gray knitted cardigan. Below, she wore a black pleated skirt that fell just above her knees. Beneath the skirt, black knee-high socks extended to mid-calf, and her feet were shod in black lace-up combat boots. Ran Wenwen possessed strikingly delicate features. A face small enough to fit in one's palm, with features not yet fully matured, but already revealing a clear and sweet contour, carrying the tender innocence and purity typical of her age. Yet at this moment, the face that should have radiated youthful vitality was etched with a heavy sorrow far beyond her years. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and her eyes held an unshakable shadow of anxiety and dread. She should not have been standing here. Ran Wenwen mulled over this thought repeatedly. She had only just reached the legal minimum age for marriage, and there were still 2 full years of buffer time before the government-mandated latest marriage deadline. However, her family's financial situation had pushed her to this point. Ran Wenwen's family was an utterly ordinary household of 5. Her parents had toiled diligently their entire lives, their greatest wish being nothing more than their children's safety and well-being. Ran Wenwen was the eldest child with 2 younger brothers beneath her. While other girls had long begun working trading their youth for wages to support their families, Ran Wenwen's parents gritted their teeth and insisted on keeping her in school. Her parents always said, "A girl who reads more will have more opportunities in the future, unlike us who have no skills." She had lived up to their expectations, consistently ranking at the top of her class and serving as her parents' greatest pride. But fate seemed to delight in tormenting the poor. Her 2 younger brothers despised studying and had entered society at an early age. They claimed they were venturing out to lighten the family's burden, yet they learned nothing of value, while their knack for causing trouble grew day by day. This time her youngest brother had made a catastrophic mistake at the factory where he worked, causing an entire batch of equipment to be scrapped. The factory issued an ultimatum: either pay compensation or face imprisonment. The family's world collapsed in an instant. After selling everything sellable and borrowing from every relative they could approach, the money they scraped together was barely enough to resolve the matter. But the lingering debt added insult to injury for this already struggling household. After deliberation, her parents concluded that the best course of action was to have Ran Wenwen enter into a matched marriage. This way perhaps Ran Wenwen's life might improve. And with one less mouth to feed, the family could breathe easier. Ran Wenwen agreed. She understood that it was her turn to sacrifice for the family. The kindness her parents had shown in supporting her education had always been etched in her heart. She had planned to find a good job after graduation to repay them and grant them a comfortable life. But now that dream seemed destined to remain unfulfilled. Once married off to another family, what aspect of her life, her body, her time, even her thoughts, would remain under her own control? Especially now that the matching was about to commence, Ran Wenwen's heart grew even more frantic. The mere thought of assigned marriage made her stomach churn. She was about to be forcibly handed over to a man she had never met, forever shackled by the chains of matrimony. Stepping into an entirely unfamiliar household, facing a group of strangers with no blood ties who might treat her with disdain, carefully reading their expressions and living at their mercy. Merely imagining it made Ran Wenwen feel suffocated. If fate were to play another cruel joke on her, matching her with a repulsive-looking destitute man. Ran Wenwen squeezed her eyes shut, daring not to imagine further. And what about her tuition? Once a girl married out of her natal family, she was like water spilled on the ground, never to return. Even if her parents wished to help her now, they would likely be powerless to do so. Would that unknown husband be willing, or even capable, of continuing to fund her education? In this era of survival struggles, who would pay tuition for an outsider, a student who couldn't immediately bring value? Ugliness and poverty. Perhaps she could close her eyes, hypnotize herself, pretend it was merely a pig trampling her. If she could endure it, maybe the days would eventually pass. But what terrified Ran Wenwen the most was being matched with a man of violent temper and abusive tendencies. Ever since childhood, the relentless sounds of beatings and scoldings from Uncle Wang's house next door, along with Aunt Wang's cowering figure perpetually covered in fresh and old wounds, had carved a deep shadow into her heart. She was afraid of becoming the next Aunt Wang, exhausting her short and pitiful life under daily fists and kicks. A slight stir interrupted Ran Wenwen's chaotic thoughts. At the far end of the hall, a door slid open silently, and a group of equally young men walked in. Some appeared composed, some had wandering eyes, and some wore unconcealed, scrutinizing gazes. Under the staff's guidance, the boys and girls stood facing each other at a deliberate distance. Ran Wenwen's heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and her palms began to sweat. Her gaze involuntarily swept across the unfamiliar men, tall and short, stout and thin, each with distinct appearances. Among them one would soon become her legal husband, the master of her future life. Who would it be? Would it be that somewhat dull-looking one? Or the one with that slightly frivolous look in his eyes? The matching process will now begin. Please take your positions in the designated areas, a staff member's voice rang out. The girls and boys each moved, ultimately forming 2 clearly demarcated parallel lines. After a brief silence from the male cue, Gu Chun stepped forward first. He held the first right of selection. Almost instantly, all eyes were drawn to Gu Chun. His figure was tall and straight, standing out among most of his peers. His features could be considered handsome, though his attire was quite plain and his frame somewhat lean. Almost instinctively, Ran Wenwen tapped the personal information terminal strapped to her wrist. On the screen, Gu Chen's profile appeared succinctly: name, Gu Chen, identity D-class, awakened, self-introduction, XXXX awakened. Those 2 words elicited low gasps from many of the surrounding girls, their eyes blazing with fervent light. In this era, awakened individuals formed the privileged class of society. They possessed strength or special abilities surpassing ordinary humans, enjoyed esteemed status and handsome incomes, and were the most coveted marriage partners imaginable. D-class, while not the pinnacle of awakened rankings, was already exceedingly rare for someone of his age, sufficient to guarantee a worry-free life after marriage. Decent-looking and a powerful awakened. Nearly every girl unconsciously straightened her back, attempting to present her best self. In their eyes, Chen was undoubtedly the most valuable resource worth competing for in today's forced matching. However, Ran Wenwen's heart remained utterly unmoved, not a trace of delight, but rather a surge of repulsion. Yes, in others' eyes, being an awakened might be a fine qualification. Marrying him, her mother would surely smile from ear to ear, and they wouldn't have to worry about making ends meet in the near future. Her tuition might also be resolved. But this identity was too dangerous. The very purpose of an awakened's existence was combat. Fighting against the terrifying aberrant beasts in the uninhabited zones, participating in high-risk combat missions. Their daily lives were spent walking the edge of life and death. Reports of awakened casualties were a common sight in newspapers and online. She didn't want it. She absolutely refused to live a life of constant anxiety, never knowing whether her husband would return home the next day. Nor did she wish, perhaps in the not-so-distant future, to become a young widow. According to national regulations, under certain conditions, those who had lost their partners would be forcibly arranged for remarriage. Ran Wenwen could not accept this fate of being shuffled around like livestock passed from one man's hands to another's, nor could she bear to imagine her children enduring the chaotic life of changing fathers. Ran Wenwen would rather her partner be the most ordinary of men. Even if his family background was modest, even if they had to tighten their belts together. As long as he had a stable job, far from danger, lived a safe and peaceful life, and grew old alongside her, that would be more than enough. Amidst her turbulent thoughts, Chen had already begun his selection. Chen strode forward, passing before the first girl in the queue. His gaze swept indifferently across her face, then lowered to the information terminal on his wrist to review her details. Immediately, a girl who couldn't contain her impatience made her move. "Choose me. I'm also an awakened rank. If we unite, we can look out for each other." A tall young woman with a hint of valor between her brows spoke first, her tone confident and direct. Chen's stride didn't falter in the slightest. He didn't even spare her a second glance, walking straight past her to the next person. The ignored female awakened's face instantly turned sour, and she stamped her foot in frustration. "Look at me. My medical report is perfectly healthy. My measurements are 88-60-90. I'm absolutely the best choice for bearing children." Another girl with a striking figure thrust out her chest, her voice sweet and cloying as she marketed herself. Chen's pace remained steady. He didn't even twitch an eyebrow, continuing forward without pause. One by one, the women made their moves, yet Chen passed them by like a fleeting glance at flowers. With each girl he passed, he'd lower his head to check his terminal, then lift his gaze to scan her, his face utterly expressionless throughout, revealing not a shred of particular interest in anyone. After a brief silence, the girls he had mercilessly passed began to murmur complaints. What's he so arrogant for? He's just a D-rank awakened, isn't he? Exactly. Does he really think he's some hot commodity? I think his eyes are on top of his head. He doesn't know a good thing when he sees it. If you ask me, he's looking for someone with a good family background too, right?" These whispers of discontent pierced clearly into Ran Wenwen's ears. She kept her head lowered, trying to shrink her presence, silently praying, "Don't look at me, don't pick me, just hurry on past." Yet fate seemed to delight in playing its cruelest jokes. The footsteps came to a halt before her. A pair of worn-out sneakers entered her downcast field of vision. Ran Wenwen's heart leapt into her throat, as she could feel a gaze settling upon her. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Chen's attention was now fixed on the personal information terminal in his hand. Name: Ran Wenwen. Identity: current student. Self-introduction: XXXXXXXXX. After 2 seconds of silence, Chen raised his hand, his finger pointing directly at Ran Wenwen. "I choose her. Ran Wenwen." Ran Wenwen stared blankly at the finger pointed at her. Her delicate brows furrowed slightly, her mind a whirl of confusion, utterly unable to fathom why this man had chosen her as the one to enter into marriage. Glancing around the hall, there were still many eligible women waiting for matching, including no shortage of formidable female awakened. In this post-cataclysm era, strength and the ability to survive were the most practical considerations, and she, aside from a passably pretty face, seemed to possess few qualities worth praising. At the very least, among the many choices present, she was far from the optimal one. "Tisk, what terrible taste." A voice sounded from the side, dripping with sarcasm. The speaker was the female awakened who had earlier proactively shown goodwill towards Chen and expressed her desire to marry. She cast a glance at Ran Wenwen, who was elegantly beautiful, yet appeared somewhat frail, and curled her lips into a contemptuous smirk. "In this day and age, what's the use of just being pretty? She can't carry a shoulder pole or lift her hands. Isn't she just a pretty but useless vase? If she runs into danger, a man would have to be distracted protecting her." Though her words weren't directed at anyone by name, everyone present could tell who they were aimed at. Many secretly nodded, finding the words quite reasonable. When awakened, choose a spouse. Besides bearing offspring, they place greater value on whether the two can support each other in dangerous environments and jointly withstand unknown risks. Choosing a seemingly fragile partner in many people's eyes was not a wise move. Yet faced with such a near-provocative taunt, Chen seemed not to have heard it at all, not even sparing a sidelong glance at the female awakened. He merely looked quietly at Ran Wenwen, his gaze calm and unreadable, his true thoughts inscrutable. The reason behind his choice was vastly different from what others assumed. Indeed, if one were purely considering personal benefit and survival, the E-rank female awakened who had proactively shown interest was undoubtedly the more suitable partner. A union of strength would naturally guarantee higher security for future missions in the uninhabited zones. But in Chen's heart, there was another far more important consideration. When his gaze had swept past earlier, he had caught a glimpse of the school uniform Ran Wenwen was wearing. It was the standard issue uniform of Winbel Academy, exactly the same as the one his younger sister Gutong wore. His sister Gutong was the person he cared for most in this world, the very reason he strove to survive. After their parents' deaths, the siblings had relied only on each other, and Gutong was the unshakable priority in his life. The wife he sought wasn't just a partner who would be good to him, but someone who could look after Gutong in his stead should he be unable to return home due to missions or other reasons. A fellow student might be able to take care of Gutong at any time and would likely be more readily accepted by her. The Ran Wenwen before him, even if she was just an ordinary person, the significance represented by that uniform surpassed all other conditions. The moment he saw that uniform, almost in an instant, Chen had made his decision. Ms. Ran Wenwen, according to Article 17 of the Marriage Matching Regulations, citizens have the obligation to accept the priority mate selection of awakened. You have no right to refuse this choice. A nearby staff member stated matter-of-factly while holding an electronic record tablet. Ran Wenwen instinctively bit her lower lip. What else could she do? The regulations were thus: upon reaching adulthood, one was to marry and have children, contributing to the continuation of humanity. These were the rules established for the survival of the species after the cataclysm. She took a deep breath, gave a slight nod, and said in a voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz, "I understand. All right." The staff member quickly operated on the tablet. "Mr. Chen, Miss Ran Wenwen, please follow me to complete the final confirmation procedures, including information registration and photo taking for the marriage certificate." The two followed the staff member, leaving the hall and heading towards a separate private office. The entire process was swift: information verification, electronic signatures, photo taking, all as streamlined as an assembly line. In just over 10 minutes, two brand new red marriage certificates were handed to them. Stepping out of the Marriage Administration Bureau, the sunlight was somewhat dazzling. The two walked side by side along the sidewalk, silent and at a loss for words, the atmosphere momentarily stagnant. After all, for both of them, this was the first time in their lives entering the bonds of matrimony, and in such a hasty manner, having been joined together without knowing each other well. Though their minds were filled with their own thoughts, neither knew how to initiate a conversation. The silence stretched for about 100 meters until it was ultimately Chen who broke the awkwardness. He stopped, turned his head to Ran Wenwen, and said, "I have some things to attend to. I'll be going now." Ran Wenwen was momentarily taken aback, looking up at Chen. She saw him nod slightly as a farewell, then turn and stride away, merging into the stream of people on the street, soon disappearing from sight. Watching that receding figure, Ran Wenwen stood in place, clutching the marriage certificate in her hand, her heart a whirlwind of complex emotions. So, this was it. She was married to a man who was almost a complete stranger. Chen walked alone on the road, his fingertips tracing the cover of the marriage certificate, a similar feeling of daze washing over him. The transition from single to married had been so swift that it felt surreal. According to regulations, this matched marriage could not be dissolved until a child was successfully produced. What would his future life look like? When and under what circumstances would he meet his new wife again? At the thought, Ran Wenwen's visage involuntarily surfaced in Chen's mind. He had to admit, in terms of pure appearance, this new wife of his was stunningly beautiful, with delicate features like a painting and an elegant temperament. She would probably be a top beauty even at Fengling Academy. But she and his sister Gutong attended the same school. Did they know each other? If they did, would future encounters add another layer of awkwardness? After the catastrophe, in order to cultivate various talents more effectively and rapidly to meet survival challenges, the Dragon Kingdom had implemented sweeping reforms to its original education system. The previous divisions of primary school, middle school, and university were completely abolished, replaced by a profession-oriented academy system. Before enrollment, each individual had to first determine their future major field: combat, scientific research, engineering, medicine, agriculture, journalism, art, and so on, and then enter the corresponding specialized academy based on their chosen profession. These academies offered a complete training system from F-level basic introduction to A-level top expert. Students could advance through levels within the academy based on their learning progress and abilities, or they could choose to graduate early upon completing any level. The school would issue a graduation certificate of the corresponding level based on the student's final level achieved upon graduation. For instance, Gu Chen's sister Gu Tong was currently a student in class 3rd grade D of the journalism department at Fengling Academy. If she chose to graduate now, the academy would confer upon her an E-level journalism degree certificate, proving she had mastered the knowledge and skills of that profession at the E-level. Gu Chen shook his head, temporarily suppressing the chaotic thoughts. Thinking about all this was useless. The most pressing matter was to go back, pack his things, and move to the new home he had just rented. Though it was called moving, his possessions were pitifully few, just some clothes and his sister Gu Tong's textbooks and study materials. Returning to the low, cramped shack, Gu Chen swiftly packed his meager belongings, carried them, and headed for the new home. On the other side, Ran Wenwen, having taken the day off to get married, hurried back to Fengling Academy after the formalities to continue her afternoon classes. By the time school let out, she dragged her somewhat weary body home, only to be astonished to find all her personal belongings packed into 2 suitcases placed in the corner of the living room. And the door to the small room she used to occupy was now wide open, with some items clearly belonging to a boy placed inside, her younger brother's things. Her mother, Chen Yulan, wearing an apron and busy in the kitchen, noticed her return and asked with concern, "When you're back? How is my son-in-law?" The image of the man from the Marriage Administration Bureau flashed through Ran Wenwen's mind. She forced a relaxed smile at her mother. Just meant not very familiar yet. He is quite good-looking, though. Can good looks be eaten? Chen Yulan's brows furrowed, looking unimpressed. Character is what matters. By the way, I've packed all your things, just those 2 suitcases. She gestured with her chin towards the corner of the living room. Since you've got the certificate now, from today onwards you are no longer a member of the Rand family. You know the rules here. Once married, a woman must live in her husband's home. A girl lingering in her parents' house all the time. What would that look like? Though not an explicit law, it was indeed a tradition in the Dragon Kingdom. Once a man and woman married, the woman would immediately move into the man's home to quickly get acquainted and prepare for starting a family. Chen Yulan wouldn't let her daughter stay even one more night, fearing that the neighbors would gossip and point fingers at the Rand family behind their backs. Ran Wenwen's heart trembled. "Mom, it's too late today, and I'm not familiar with him yet. Could I stay one more night? Tomorrow. I'll move tomorrow." Hearing this, Chen Yulan's face immediately hardened. She tapped the spatula forcefully on the edge of the stove, producing a harsh clang. "Stay? No way. You're a married daughter now. Staying here will only make people laugh at us. Your brother's things were moved into your room this afternoon. Where would you even sleep? Hurry up, grab your things, and go to where you belong. There's 200 yuan on top of the suitcases. Take it, and hide it well. Don't be foolish and let your husband find out." Ran Wenwen wanted to plead a few more times, but Chen Yulan had already turned away, ignoring her. There wasn't even a portion of dinner prepared for her. On the dining table in the living room, 4 sets of bowls and chopsticks were laid out, clearly set for her parents and 2 younger brothers. Ran Wenwen looked at her busy mother, at the room that no longer belonged to her, and at the luggage piled in the corner of the living room. Silently, she walked forward. She was homeless. Gu Chun, wearing an apron, was busy in the not-so-spacious kitchen. Thinking it was the first day in the new home, Gu Chun had bought some extra vegetables, meat, and a small bag of rice, intending to cook a nice meal to celebrate. Once the oil in the wok was hot, he tossed in the chopped green onions, ginger, and garlic. With a sizzle, the aroma instantly filled the air. Although the apartment wasn't very large for the area compared to the shantytown shack they had squeezed into before, it was a world of difference. At least here there was a separate kitchen and bathroom, no longer the dilapidated shack that leaked when it rained and let the wind whistle through the cracks. His sister Gu Tong was like a curious little bird running around the new home, touching this and looking at that, her face filled with excitement. "Brother, this wall is so white." She poked the living room wall with her finger. Gu Chun glanced back, smiled, and tossed the washed greens into the wok to stir-fry. "Of course. From now on, this is our home." Gu Tong hopped over to the kitchen doorway, leaned against the doorframe, and curiously watched her brother work. "Brother, how was your level assessment at the mutant management office today? Is it high?" Gu Chen scooped the cooked greens onto a plate and started preparing another piece of meat. The meat today was specially bought with extra money. Although it cost a bit, today was a memorable day, first moving to a new home, second. He was about to head to the uninhabited zone for a mission soon. Who knew if this would be their last meal? Naturally, it deserved to be a hearty one. "Not bad, got rated D level," Gu Chun replied, his tone flat. "Neither high nor low, received 30,000 yuan. Gu Tong said, "Oh," and leaned in closer, lowering her voice with a hint of gossipy excitement. "So, about the marriage thing. Brother, you got married. Gu Chun acknowledged, not pausing his hands as he carefully sliced the meat into thin pieces. "Then is my sister-in-law pretty?" Gu Tong's big eyes blinked. "When are you bringing her home for me to meet?" Gu Chen's hands paused for a moment, then he continued slicing the meat, saying, We'll see when she has time. Just then a thump 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 knock sounded at the door. Both Gu Chen in the kitchen and Gu Tong in the living room were startled. Who could it be at this hour? They had just moved in and theoretically no one should know them. Is it a neighbor? Saw us moving in and came to say hello. Gu Chen guessed, putting down the knife, and said to Gu Tong, "Xiao Tong, go see who's at the door." Gu Tong nodded, quickly ran to the door and opened it. Outside the door stood a girl who looked young, about the same age as Gu Tong. She wore a school uniform that was washed, somewhat pale, but still neat, and carried 2 rather large suitcases. Sweat beaded on her forehead, as if she had walked a long distance. Wen, how do you know where I live? Gu Tong asked, her mouth slightly agape in confusion. Ran Wen was also puzzled, a ridiculous thought crossing her mind. Tong, who is Gu Chen to you? Her voice was soft, tinged with nervousness. Hearing his name, Gu Chen stepped out of the kitchen and walked over to the door. Seeing the girl outside, he was taken aback. It was Ran Wen, the wife he had just been assigned. In an instant he understood something. What a small world. How could the wife he just brought home know Xiao Tong, and even find their new doorstep directly? Brother, Gu Tong turned back, her clear eyes full of confusion. This is Sister Wen, Ran Wen. She's a good friend I made in the student union at school. She's a really nice person. I've mentioned her to you before, saying she's helped me a lot. Sister Wen, this is my brother Gu Chen. Gu Tong held Ran Wen's hand and pointed at Gu Chen, introducing them enthusiastically. Brother. Ran Wen's pretty face, already flushed from her travels, reddened even more, and even her lips trembled slightly. She looked at Gu Chen in disbelief, then at Gu Tong, as if she had heard an impossible tale. Good heavens! What kind of joke is this? The husband she was just assigned to turned out to be the elder brother of her good friend Gu Tong. At that moment Ran Wen's mind went completely blank, as if countless crows were circling overhead, cawing noisily. She even wanted to crawl into a hole. This was too awkward and utterly mortifying scene. She had even complained to Gu Tong before, saying she was about to go through marriage matching, but didn't want to get married so early. Gu Tong had joked back, wondering what would happen if she got matched with some weirdo. And what happened? Not only did she get matched, but she was matched directly to her best friend's brother. She didn't even know how to break this to Gu Tong. You two know each other. Gu Chen's gaze fell on Ran Wen's 2 suitcases and the fine beads of sweat on her forehead, and he already had a rough idea. Come on in. Gu Chen stepped aside, making way at the door, and naturally reached out to take her 2 large suitcases. The suitcases felt heavy in his hands, suggesting she had brought a lot of things. Ran Wen felt a bit embarrassed, but followed him inside. Gu Tong looked curiously at this sudden visit from her best friend, then at her brother, somewhat puzzled. Gu Chen placed the suitcases in the corner of the living room, and turned to introduce her to Gu Tong. Xiao Tong, Ran Wen. From now on she's your sister-in-law. Then he introduced Gu Tong to Ran Wen. Gu Tong is my sister. Sister-in-law. Gu Tong looked at her brother, then at Ran Wen, whose expression was shifting unpredictably. Her little head, under the massive impact of information, finally managed to piece together a bewildering logical thread. Brother, the person you said you were marrying is Sister Wen. What is going on here? Gu Tong's voice suddenly rose an octave, filled with incredulity. Gu Chen glanced at Ran Wen and said calmly, what else could it be? Assigned by the marriage administration. We're legally married. Ran Wen nodded awkwardly and gave Gu Tong a shy smile. I didn't know he was. Her heart was a jumble of mixed emotions. Shame, embarrassment, helplessness, and a hint of reassurance. Even she hadn't noticed it herself. At least Gu Chen was Gu Tong's brother, his character couldn't be bad. And with Gu Tong here to keep her company, it was much better than being matched with a complete stranger. Ran Wen was in Class 1 Grade C of the Business Administration Department. Though she was in a different faculty from Gu Tong, both were members of the student union and had always had a good relationship. She had often heard Gu Tong talk about her brother, saying how good he was to her, and that he was the best brother in the world. Little did she expect that this best brother would one day become her husband. What a wonderful stroke of fate. Gu Chen poured a glass of water for Ran Wen and asked, how did you know I live here? Ran Wen held the cup, taking small sips, and replied, It's from the marriage certificate that was sent earlier. It has your information and this address. My family told me to move in today. Her voice grew quieter and quieter, as if it was hard to say. Gu Chen understood immediately. Her family was probably eager to send her off to lighten their burden. In this day and age, such things weren't uncommon. You can stay here from now on, Gu Chen said in a calm tone. Dinner is almost ready. You should rest for a while. He didn't have any objections to Ran Wen's arrival. Just as he had thought before, it didn't matter much to him whether it was good or bad. If Ran Wen didn't come, he'd save some food. Now that she was here, there was an extra person to help look after Gu Tong. Gu Tong was sharp-witted and immediately caught on. Oi, Sister Wen, don't be so polite. Treat this as your own home. No, wait, this is your home now. Ran Wen nodded, her expression relaxing a little. Since they already knew each other, the two women quickly started chatting away, talking about gossip at school, how the teachers and classmates were doing, and so on. The atmosphere in the living room became much lighter. Seeing this, Chen turned and went back to the kitchen to continue preparing dinner. Before long, Ran 11 followed him into the kitchen. Honey, she changed her address awkwardly. Is there anything I can help with? I can wash vegetables or chop them. Chen glanced at her. Ran 11 stood there, her hands twisting nervously together, a hint of eagerness in her eyes, as if she really wanted to be useful. All right, you can help me peel these potatoes then. He handed her a peeler and a few potatoes. Okay. Ran 11 immediately took them, walked over to the sink, and began peeling the potatoes earnestly, her movements quick and efficient. As she peeled, she said softly, in the future, you can leave all the housework to me. Cooking, laundry, cleaning. I can do it all. Chen looked at her profile from across the steam rising from the pot, her head bowed, as she focused on peeling potatoes, and his satisfaction with this assigned wife increased a notch. She was sensible, not spoiled, and seemed diligent. That was good enough. Soon the meal was ready. There was a plate of stir-fried pork with scallions and ginger, a dish of vinegar-glazed shredded potatoes, a plate of sautéed seasonal vegetables, and a large basin of fragrant white rice. It wasn't extravagant, but given the Gu family's circumstances, having meat and rice was already a rare and precious meal. The three of them sat around the small dining table. Chen first picked a generous portion of meat slices for Gu Tong, then some for Ran 11 as well. Eat more meat. You need to build up your strength, he said. Gu Tong didn't need any encouragement. Her eyes narrowed with joy as she immediately dug in, her little mouth stuffed full. It had been a long time since she'd seen this much meat at once. Back when they lived in Xiago Alley, she only got a taste of a bit of minced meat on special occasions. Ran 11 looked at the small mountain of meat piled in her bowl, but she was stunned, her eyes slightly reddening. Although her family cared for her, she was ultimately a daughter, and her parents ultimately favored her younger brother more. At every meal, the good food always went to her father and brother first. What she could eat was often what they left behind. To have someone proactively put food in her bowl, especially so much meat, was a first in her life. Ran 11 silently lowered her head, picked up her chopsticks, and ate the meat slices and rice in her bowl in small, quiet bites. The meat was fragrant, and the rice was soft and sticky. As she ate, a complex feeling welled up in her heart. Touched, and also a warmth she found hard to describe. Perhaps this forced marriage wasn't as bad as she had imagined. At least the man before her didn't seem as rude and cold as she had feared. Chen watched the two girls eat while he mostly stuck to the greens and shredded potatoes, occasionally picking up a slice or two of meat. He needed to maintain his strength, but he also wanted his sister and this new family member to eat well. After the meal, Ran 11 eagerly rushed to clear the table. Chen initially wanted to stop her, but seeing her insistence, he let her be. The sound of running water soon came from the kitchen. Gu Tong, full and content, was feeling sleepy, but she still excitedly chatted with Chen and Ran 11 for a while, mostly about future plans, like whether Chen would frequently go to the uninhabited zones, and whether Ran 11 would give her brother children. When it was almost 10:30 p.m., Gu Tong yawned and said sensibly, "Brother, sister-in-law, I'm going to bed. You should get some rest too." With that, she ran back to her room, slammed the door shut with a bang, and locked it from the inside. It was clear she wasn't going to let Ran 11 sleep with her. Only Chen and Ran 11 were left in the living room, and the atmosphere became subtly awkward. The apartment was small. Besides Gu Tong's bedroom, there was only one other bedroom, a small kitchen, a small living room, and a bathroom. We should get some rest too. Chen broke the silence, pointing to the remaining bedroom. That is our room. Ran 11 nodded, her cheeks beginning to burn again. The two of them walked into the bedroom one after the other. The room was tiny, with just a standard double bed and a simple wardrobe, leaving almost no extra space. The bed was made with red sheets and a red quilt, which was rather fitting for the occasion. After entering the room, neither of them spoke, and a subtle awkwardness hung in the air. Chen sat down on the edge of the bed, hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Have you ever had feelings for someone before?" Ran 11 seemed taken aback by the question, pausing briefly before gently shaking her head. "No, neither have I." Chen stated frankly, "I was always focused on keeping Xiao Tong alive before such thoughts never crossed my mind." He paused, then continued, "From now on, we are a family. I may have to be away occasionally due to work. I'll need you to take care of the household and Xiao Tong in my absence." "I will." Ran 11 lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll take good care of my sister, and I'll take good care of this home." Chen nodded, feeling that everything necessary had been said, and they had a preliminary understanding of each other. He stood up. "It's getting late, almost 11. Let's sleep." Ran 11 glanced at the modest double bed, nervously twisting the hem of her clothes with her fingers, feeling at a loss. Although they were nominally husband and wife, having met for the first time only today, the prospect of sharing a bed filled her with intense shyness and anxiety. Chen noticed her discomfort and said nothing. He simply removed his outer garment and lay down on the inner side of the bed, leaving the larger portion of the outer side for her. "Come up, don't just stand there." Ran 11 hesitated for a moment, then finally moved slowly to the bedside, carefully took off her shoes, and lay down on the outer edge of the bed, fully clothed, her body stiff, trying to keep as much distance from Gu Chen as possible. Gu Chen turned off the dim lamp in the room. In the darkness, all that could be heard was the sound of their slightly hurried breathing. The night was deep. The walls were thin, and there seemed to be no sound from the next room. Gu Tong had probably already fallen into a deep sleep. The bedroom was eerily quiet. After what felt like a long time, Gu Chen turned over. Ran Wenwen's heartbeat accelerated instantly. Unsure how to respond, she could only let things happen. At 3 in the morning, the moonlight outside the window filtered through the thin curtains, casting a hazy, soft glow. In the next room, Gu Tong tossed and turned in her bed, pressing her pillow over her ears and muttering resentfully under her breath, "Ugh. It's 3 in the morning and they're still not asleep. So noisy. Doesn't sister-in-law have school tomorrow?" The next morning, before the pale gray clouds had fully parted over the ruined city, Gu Chen was already up. The room was dimly lit with only a sliver of weak dawn light filtering through the gap in the curtains. He moved quietly, trying not to make a sound, and glanced sideways at Ran Wenwen, who was still sound asleep beside him. Under the soft light, her serene, sleeping face appeared even more gentle and lovely. The blanket had slipped off, revealing her fair, smooth shoulder marked with a few faint red traces left from the previous night's passion. Gu Chen's cheeks felt slightly warm, and a flicker of guilt and tenderness passed through his eyes. Last night he had indeed been somewhat excessive. Without disturbing her, he quietly lifted the blanket and got dressed. The sound of the door lock turning was heard, followed by the door being pulled open and gently closed again. On the bed, Ran Wenwen's long eyelashes fluttered slightly before she slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes held a trace of waking confusion along with a hint of shyness. In truth, she had been awakened by the faint noises Gu Chen made when he got up. However, she didn't know how to face him at that moment, so she simply closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. On the one hand, the shyness of a newlywed made her afraid to meet Gu Chen's gaze. On the other hand, she was secretly worried he might pounce on her again. A few days prior, her mother Chen Yulan had privately shared some advice with her about the first days of marriage. One point she emphasized repeatedly was that men often become addicted to such pleasures, and after the first taste they tend to lack restraint. She warned her daughter to be careful to protect herself and not to let herself be worn out. Gu Chen's behavior the previous night had given her a profound understanding of what her mother meant by lacking restraint. She lay quietly in bed for about 10 minutes, listening to the faint sounds of Gu Chen washing up and preparing breakfast outside. Only then did the panic and embarrassment in her heart gradually subside. Only then did she get up, quietly tidied herself, and leave the room. The atmosphere at breakfast was somewhat delicate. Gu Tong seemed to be in low spirits and remained mostly silent. Ran Wenwen kept her head down, eating small bites of food, occasionally glancing quickly at Gu Chen before immediately lowering her head again, a faint blush perpetually coloring her cheeks. Gu Chen also sensed his wife's discomfort. Finding it somewhat amusing, yet also endearing, he proactively brought up light topics to ease the slightly awkward silence. After the simple breakfast, Gu Chen checked the time and saw it was about time to leave. He stood up, gave a few words of instruction to Ran Wenwen, and Gu Tong bid them farewell and headed out towards the garrison. Today happened to be the day for assigning patrol duties in the uninhabited zone. All newly certified awakened were required to report this week. Gu Chen arrived at a building complex enclosed by high walls. At exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, several dozen newly awakened individuals were already scattered across the assembly square, Gu Chen among them. The crowd whispered among themselves, their faces a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Before long, a few middle-aged men walked into the square. Holding name lists, they called out names in loud voices, splitting the corresponding newcomers into groups and leading them away. Gu Chen, Fan Junyi, Zhang Liyan, Zheng Moyan. A voice called out. Gu Chen acknowledged and looked towards the source. The one calling his name was a middle-aged man around 40 with an ordinary face and an arrogant look in his eyes. Through a brief introduction, Gu Chen learned the man's identity. He was the captain of the 78th Squad of the patrol team for the Outer 7th District's uninhabited zone, surnamed Wu. From today onwards, the patrol assignments for Gu Chen and the others in the uninhabited zone would be managed by Captain Wu. Gu Chen followed Captain Wu as he left the square, accompanied by the other 3 newcomers who had been called, 2 men and 1 woman. Along the way, Captain Wu walked at the front, hands clasped behind his back with a measured pace that carried an air of bureaucratic self-importance. Occasionally, he would turn his head and scrutinize the newcomers behind him with a condescending gaze. His tone had a distinct air of superiority, indifferent and laced with a performative arrogance. "You few, from now on you're under my command. When you get to the uninhabited zone, stay sharp. It's not like the city out there. Listen to what you should listen to, do what you should do. Don't cause me any trouble, and don't make things difficult for yourselves. Understood?" "Understood, understood. Rest assured, Captain Wu." Fan Junyi, a seemingly quick-witted young man, immediately nodded and bowed obsequiously. Zhang Liyan also quickly chimed in. Yes, we will definitely follow Captain Wu's arrangements." Zheng Moyan, who was a bit more reserved, also nodded in agreement. Gu Chen stood behind the group silent. He had never cared for such overtly bureaucratic types, and Captain Wu's demeanor and words stirred a subtle sense of aversion within him. However, he didn't show it. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Especially in the uninhabited zone, offending the captain who directly managed him was certainly not a wise move. If he were to be deliberately targeted by Captain Wu during future patrols sent to dangerous areas or assigned grueling tasks, life would become unbearable. Gu Chen understood this, and so did the others. Before they had walked far, Fan Junyi, Zhang Liyan, and Zheng Moyan quietly sidled up to Captain Wu. Fan Junyi wore a fawning smile as he pulled a small oil paper-wrapped object from his pocket, slipping it into Captain Wu's outstretched hand, murmuring, "Captain Wu, just a small token of my respect. I hope for your continued guidance in the future." Zheng Moyan followed suit, presenting a delicate metal case that appeared to hold premium cigarettes. Zhang Liyan, more direct, pressed a few crumpled, yet high-denomination banknotes into his palm. The arrogance on Captain Wu's face softened slightly. He stowed the offerings away without a change in expression, nodded at the trio, and said with a hint of warmth, "Don't worry. Stick with me, and nothing will happen to you." Only Gu Chen held back. He had no spare money for such gestures. His household finances were already stretched thin, and with Ran Wenwen newly wedded into the family, he couldn't possibly squander the little they had left on bribery. Moreover, he was a D-class awakened. According to Dragon Nation regulations, awakened of D-class and above were only required to serve 1 year of mandatory patrol duty in the uninhabited zone, after which they could choose whether to continue based on personal preference. For E-class and F-class awakened like Fan Junyi and the others, however, unless they made exceptional contributions or earned a promotion, they were obligated to rotate through frontline duty in the uninhabited zone for 3 years, unless they were no longer fit for service during that period. Thus, relatively speaking, Gu Chen felt far less urgency to curry favor with Captain Wu. After collecting his tributes, Captain Wu's gaze swept over Gu Chen with a noticeably colder look. The group pressed on, hitching a ride on a military vehicle to the border between Outer 7th District and the uninhabited zone. Towering metal walls and dense coils of barbed wire stood there, punctuated by watchtowers at regular intervals. After presenting their awakened credentials, they passed through the heavy isolation gates. The uninhabited zone. Gu Chen had only ever glimpsed this area from afar. This was his first time setting foot within it. If Outer 7th District was a picture of decay and desolation, then the uninhabited zone was even more so. As far as the eye could see, there were only crumbling ruins overrun by rampant vines and weeds. Former streets lay buried beneath thick layers of dust and fallen leaves, their outlines barely discernible. Towering high-rises stood like the silent skeletons of giants, riddled with cracks and cloaked in moss. Shattered windows gaped like hollow eye sockets, silently narrating the splendor of the past and the lifeless stillness of the present. "All right, snap out of it." Captain Wu's raised voice cut through their observations. "This area we're in now has been swept clean by the military multiple times. Theoretically, it's safe. There shouldn't be any aberrant beasts here." He pointed toward the dense forest barely visible in the distance, and continued, "Even if one slips through occasionally, our patrol squad can spot and handle it in time. The real danger lies in the quarantine zone 10 kilometers out. Things are far more complicated there. Powerful aberrant beasts are a common sight. Our 78th Squad is responsible for an area in the forest called the Skyrend Cliff. Our main objective is to prevent any aberrant beast from breaking through the quarantine line and entering the city's outskirts, threatening urban safety." "Understood. Understood," they chorused. Zhang Liyan turned to gaze at the towering, unbroken isolation wall. "Captain, if the isolation wall can withstand aberrant beast attacks, why not build one along the edge of the quarantine zone instead of spending so much manpower on patrols?" Captain Wu kept walking, a slight smirk curling at the corner of his mouth. "The isolation wall isn't easy to construct. The materials are too scarce. Besides, it can't block every aberrant beast's assault. The walls of our Outer 7th District can only hold off aberrant beasts below A-class." Before the walls were erected and the city expanded, the expeditionary force already cleared out all A-class and above aberrant beasts in this quarantine zone. Then they handed it over to us, the garrison, for patrol. "See that thing over there?" Captain Wu halted, pointing ahead. It was a towering iron pillar reaching so high into the sky that it looked like a slender needle from afar. "That's called a detection tower. If an A-class aberrant beast shows up in the quarantine zone, it emits a red light as a warning. One of our garrison's main duties is to eliminate low-level aberrant beasts and keep them from damaging the towers." Gu Chen was hearing all this for the first time and couldn't help but take a longer look at the black pillar. After walking a considerable distance further, the terrain began to rise. Ahead loomed a colossal, nearly vertical rock face, like a mountain cleaved in two by a divine blade, piercing the clouds with overwhelming grandeur. On the other side of the cliff, stretching from its base, lay an endless expanse of dense forest. The camp of the 78th Squad was situated atop this Skyrend Cliff. Following a steep mountain path, the group labored upward. Upon reaching the summit, the view opened up dramatically. The ground here was flat and expansive, offering a sweeping overlook of the vast forest below. The camp consisted of several reinforced shipping containers and hastily erected sheds with observation posts set up along the cliff's edge. This location was chosen for its unobstructed sightlines, ideal for reconnaissance and early warning, and with the sheer cliff at their backs, they could reduce one direction of defense, making it relatively safer. Several awakened were already at the camp, and they came forward to greet Captain Wu as he arrived with the newcomers. After brief pleasantries and introducing the 4 newcomers, including Chen, Captain Wu led them to the edge of the camp to assign their upcoming tasks. Besides the 4 newcomers, 4 veteran members would also join the patrol rotation over the next 2 days. 8 people in total, covering a fairly vast area. Captain Wu pulled out a simple map depicting the surrounding terrain and laid it flat on a smooth rock. Various patrol zones were marked with lines in different colors. Alright, time to assign your specific patrol areas. Captain Wu cleared his throat, picked up a twig, and began pointing at the map. Generally, our area is divided into 2 parts, up the mountain and down below. Patrols up the mountain are relatively safer. People come and go daily, it's closer to camp, and reinforcements are quick to arrive if anything happens. As for the forest area down below, it's vast, the terrain is complex, and it's quite remote. Normally, aside from our patrol squad, almost no one goes there. Conditions there are a bit more complicated, so you need to be more vigilant. His twig moved to the green zone, representing the forest at the bottom of the map, circling several spots near the edge of the 10-kilometer quarantine line. Then Captain Wu began assigning by name. Fan Junyi, you're on the ridge line east of camp. It's fairly gentle, just keep an eye out. A relaxed smile immediately spread across Fan Junyi's face, and he cast a grateful glance at Captain Wu. Zhang Lian, you're responsible for the alert along the downhill path south of camp. It's the most traveled route, so you'll need to be thorough. Zheng Moyan, you'll patrol the relatively open slope to the west. Good visibility, but stay alert for concealed threats. Zhang Lian and Zheng Moyan's expressions also eased. Captain Wu's gaze shifted to the remaining Chen. He paused thoughtfully, his twig moving across the map before settling on the farthest area from camp, extending a considerable distance into the forest. Chen, you'll take this section. That's the outermost point of the entire defense zone. It's crucial. You're the only D-class among this batch of newcomers, so I trust you with it. If you encounter an aberrant beast, don't rush to engage. Contact camp with your communicator first, and wait for my orders before acting. The same goes for everyone else. He spoke in a flat tone as if this were a perfectly normal arrangement. Chen's heart tightened. He immediately understood that Captain Wu had indeed arranged the assignments based on the sincerity of the gifts offered by the 3 men earlier. The heavier the bribe, the easier and safer the assigned post. And he who had given nothing was thrown directly into the theoretically most dangerous zone. That place almost touched the extreme limit of their team's patrol area, and according to Captain Wu's earlier statement, it was a location where one might encounter aberrant beasts. Chen's brow furrowed instantly, but he suppressed the rising anger and did not lash out on the spot. Questioning the captain in front of everyone would only make things worse and make him seem ignorant of the rules. Like the others, Chen received a palm-sized black communicator from Captain Wu. This device was a contact tool for emergencies, and he truly hoped he would never have to use it. After assigning the tasks, Captain Wu announced a half-hour rest before their scheduled departure. Seizing this opportunity, Chen bided his time, avoided the others, and approached Captain Wu, who was talking with a veteran team member. Captain Wu. Chen tried to keep his tone as calm as possible. Captain Wu turned his head and glanced at him. What is it? Captain Wu, regarding my patrol area. Chen chose his words carefully. Isn't it too far out? According to the administration's regulations, new awakened assigned to the most peripheral patrol duties should be accompanied and guided by experienced veteran members operating in teams of at least 2. The implication was clear: either assign him a closer area or provide him with additional personnel. Unexpectedly, Captain Wu did not address the regulations at all. He simply waved his hand dismissively and said in a perfunctory tone, the team is shorthanded right now. All the veterans have their own designated zones. Who do you expect me to spare to follow you? Besides sending you there is a testament to your ability. Your D rank, after all, far stronger than those E and F ranks. That place shouldn't be a problem for you. These words, masquerading as praise, effectively sealed off any avenue of appeal for Chen. Pushing a high-risk task onto him, while claiming it was a sign of respect, left him with no room to argue. A cold laugh echoed in Chen's heart. It was clear Captain Wu was determined to make things difficult for him. Short-handed. Chen's voice also turned cold. Captain Wu, I refuse to believe all these veterans are assigned to the peripheral zones. With this many people, do you really need a newcomer to handle the most dangerous area? He had no desire to go to such a perilous place. He had 2 family members waiting at home. If an accident were to happen, who would take care of them? Captain Wu's face darkened. Chen, what's the meaning of this? Questioning my arrangements. I'm the captain. Oh, how I assign tasks is my prerogative. Prerogative. Gu Chun countered sharply, no longer hiding his displeasure. Does your prerogative also include accepting bribes from team members and then assigning tasks based on the size of the bribe? He stepped forward, lowering his voice. Captain Wu, what do you think would happen if I reported what I saw earlier along with your current task assignment methods exactly as they are to the higher-ups? At the mention of reporting, Captain Wu's expression changed instantly. Although the garrison forces had their own internal factions and unspoken rules, blatant acts of bribery and favoritism at the grassroots team level, if exposed and verified, would undeniably lead to severe punishment. Captain Wu stared hard at Gu Chun, his eyes full of shock and fury. He hadn't expected this seemingly quiet newcomer to be so audacious and to have seized hold of his leverage. You dare threaten me? Captain Wu gritted his teeth. This isn't a threat, it's a statement of fact and an exploration of possibilities. Gu Chun met his gaze without flinching. I'm simply asking for a fair arrangement. If you can do that, I can pretend I never saw what happened before. Captain Wu's chest heaved violently. He wished he could teach this ungrateful newcomer a harsh lesson on the spot, but with his leverage in the other's hands, a direct confrontation was hardly a wise move. After a long moment, the fury in his eyes gradually gave way to a sullen gloom. He picked up the map again, his fingers tracing over it irritably, seemingly searching for a solution that would appease Gu Chun without making him lose face entirely. Finally, his finger stopped on an area directly beneath the towering cliff face. Captain Wu forced a smile and pointed to the new location on the map. Fine, let's switch to here. This is right below our camp, much closer, right? Satisfied, Gu Chun leaned in to look at the map. Indeed, it was situated at the base of the towering cliff with a text annotation, nearby mine shaft cluster. This position was indeed much closer to the camp than the previous area, with a very short straight line distance. However, being beneath the cliff meant virtually zero visibility and fire support from above, and reinforcements couldn't simply jump down to offer assistance. The only certainty was that it was indeed somewhat better than the previous zone. Gu Chun chose not to argue further. He understood the principle of knowing when to stop. Pushing further, given Captain Wu's temperament, might provoke him into rash and extreme actions. Continued entanglement would only fully expose the conflict between them, which was not in his interest. All right, let's go with this place. Gu Chun nodded, accepting the arrangement, and followed Captain Wu back to the assembly point in the camp. Captain Wu called out to a team member who was cleaning his weapon. Howren, come here a moment. The member named when Howren looked up, around 30 years old, set down his rifle and cleaning cloth and strode over quickly. Captain Wu, what is it? When Howren asked. Captain Wu pointed at Gu Chun behind him. Do me a favor, go patrol the outermost area. Gu Chun is new and unfamiliar with this place. Have him take over your original mine shaft area closer to camp so he can get familiar with the environment. Gu Chun had expected this veteran to show some reluctance at being swapped to a farther, theoretically more dangerous location. To his surprise, when Howren merely paused for a brief moment before responding readily. All right, no problem, Captain Wu. Next, Captain Wu gave a few more inconsequential reminders and then handed out temporary garrison member badges to the newcomers. Captain Wu said to Gu Chun and the others, put on your badges, take out the communicators I gave you, and set your designated patrol areas on the map. Remember, strictly patrol your designated zones. Do not cross boundaries and do not miss any spots. Gu Chun picked up his assigned communicator and flipped it over. On the back was a small display screen currently showing an electronic map. Captain Wu guided them one by one, helping Gu Chun set the mine shaft cluster area to a highlighted yellow on the map. Once set, your patrol zone will be highlighted in yellow, Captain Wu explained. Your own position will be shown as a red dot. If the red dot leaves the yellow zone, it will start flashing an alarm to prevent you from getting lost. Understood? Understood. Gu Chun and the others responded. After setting their maps and confirming they were correct, the garrison members bid each other farewell and headed towards their respective zones, their figures quickly disappearing into the dense jungle. Watching Gu Chun's figure vanish when Howren packed up his gear but didn't leave immediately, he leisurely strolled over to Captain Wu's side and, feigning nonchalance, lowered his voice to ask. Captain Wu, Gu Chun is new, right? Have you briefed him on the situation at the mine shafts? It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. How I knew it was you, kid. Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chun's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do? But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chun's spine. He countered, Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it. Gu Chun's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off. Captain Wu listened, nodding, occasionally a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers. Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what? Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing. Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there? Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu? Gu Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Gu Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D-rank awakened. This guy might even be C-rank already. Did he come alone, or? Gu Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Gu Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C-rank. More than enough to handle you. C-rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C-rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Gu Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Gu Chen to lead the way. Gu Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Gu Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Gu Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Gu Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now, was it a spatial ability? Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Gu Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Gu Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. Gu Chen licked his parched lips, tightened his grip on the flashlight, and cautiously continued deeper into the mine shaft. The passage sloped downward, winding and twisting ahead. The flashlight's beam swayed in the darkness, illuminating only a small patch ahead. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the echo of his own footsteps reverberating through the empty tunnel. After another 10-odd minutes of walking, a faint glimmer of light seemed to emerge from the darkness ahead. The glow was neither the white beam of a flashlight nor the warm yellow of fire, but a cold, eerie luminescence tinged with a hint of ghostly blue flickering at the far end of the darkness like a will-o'-the-wisp. "What is that?" Chen muttered inwardly, his curiosity piqued. He had heard that some special ores emitted a phosphorescent glow in the dark. Slowing his pace, Chen inched closer toward the source of the blue light. The closer he drew, the clearer it became, yet it remained faint and seemed to sway gently. The passage appeared to end here, opening up into a modest cavern. Chen halted at the entrance, sweeping his flashlight beam across the space. The cavern floor was uneven, and near the inner wall lay a small pool of clear water reflecting the flashlight's glow. The eerie blue light emanated from the far side of the pool in the shadows near the cavern wall. As Chen focused intently on that glow, his foot suddenly struck something, soft yet firm. "Huh." Chen instinctively looked down, directing the flashlight beam toward the ground. One glance was all it took. His pupils contracted sharply, and a chill shot from the soles of his feet straight to the crown of his head. It was no rock or debris. It was a severed human limb. It appeared to be a leg torn brutally from the hip joint. The wound was a bloody mess, already darkening and congealed, but it was clear the death had occurred recently, no more than a day or two. Not far from the severed leg lay shredded clothing and scattered entrails. A corpse. An incomplete corpse. At almost the same moment, Chen caught a glimpse from the corner of his eye. That eerie blue light seemed to pulse, and it was moving toward him. Not fast, but the pulsing blue light drew nearer and grew clearer, gradually emerging from the deepest shadows into the edge of his flashlight's reach. Chen stared fixedly at the approaching blue light, his heart pounding wildly, his breath nearly halted. At last he saw its source. It was no ghostly flame. It was a pair of eyes, vertical slit pupils gleaming with cold, cruel light. As those eyes drew closer, a hair-raising figure slowly emerged from the shadows. It was a vaguely humanoid monster, nearly 2 meters tall, its body covered in dark green snakescale-like skin with a slick, oily sheen. Its limbs ended in sharp claws, and a thick, long tail dragged behind it. Its head was long and pointed, with a wide gash of a mouth revealing fine, dense fangs. A forked tongue flicked out intermittently, emitting a low hissing sound. Its entire form resembled a gecko magnified countless times and standing upright. Snake Man. What unsettled Chen even more were the wounds covering the creature's body. Large and small, deep gashes with flesh turned outward, oozing thick, dark green viscous fluid. Clearly fresh injuries. Beast. The word flashed through Chen's mind instantly. Without a doubt, this was a beast. And judging by its wounds and the mangled corpse on the ground, a brutal battle had occurred here not long ago. The corpse on the floor was clearly this beast's handiwork. Just as Chen took in the creature's appearance, a translucent frame, both familiar and alien, abruptly materialized before his eyes. Within the frame was a line of concise text: Snake Man LV. 52 severely wounded. The name and level displayed in a jarring vivid red. Below it was something resembling a health bar, but it was badly depleted, reduced to a short red line on the left, less than a tenth of its full length. This sudden game interface-like prompt was not unfamiliar to Chen. It was the same kind of information he had seen when he awakened his ability. Level 52. How many levels was he now? 30. A full 22 levels gap. What the hell did that mean? This Snake Man beast was nearly double his level. The level disparity was utterly crushing. Before he could react, the frame vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. Chen forced himself to remain calm, his gaze locked on the beast called Snake Man, while his body shifted backward with excruciating slowness inch by inch. Strangely, although the Snake Man fixed its eerie blue slit pupils on him and emitted threatening hisses, it did not immediately lunge to attack. Chen recalled the mangled corpse he had seen, the dense old and new wounds on the Snake Man, and combined it with the data he had just witnessed: low health, severely wounded state. A deduction swiftly took shape in his mind. This Snake Man beast had recently endured one or more fierce battles. Though it had slain its opponents, it had paid a heavy price. Severely wounded, its strength greatly diminished, now in an extremely weakened state. The reason it hadn't attacked him immediately was likely not reluctance, but inability. Or perhaps it was also assessing the threat level of this sudden intruder, unwilling to risk an uncertain battle while weakened. Its earlier approach and hissing were more like intimidation, an attempt to scare off this uninvited guest. This thought steadied Chen's nerves, if only slightly. He maintained his guard, retreating step by step. Sure enough, the Snake Man merely hissed, fixing its cold gaze on him, its body never leaving the spot, showing no intention of pursuit. Chen retreated a few more meters, nearly back to the tunnel entrance he had come through. The Snake Man still did not move. Gazing at that severely weakened beast, yet one with a level as high as 52, Gu Chen's heart suddenly began to pound uncontrollably. An extraordinarily bold, even mad, idea took root in the depths of his mind. It's dying. Its level is so high. If I could kill it now, that would be a huge windfall. Once the thought surfaced, it could no longer be suppressed. The risk was immense, but the potential reward was equally maddeningly enormous. Just as Gu Chen wrestled with the decision, the info panel about the Snake Man appeared once again. This time Gu Chen noticed that the remaining sliver of the health bar seemed to have diminished just a fraction more than when he first saw it. An extremely subtle change, but Gu Chen had absolute confidence in his eyesight and photographic memory. He was certain he had not misseen it. This meant the Snake Man's wounds were still deteriorating. Its life force was steadily ebbing away. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. "How I knew it was you, kid." Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, "Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do?" But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chen's spine. He countered, "Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That Serpent Man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it." Gu Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the Serpent Man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. "Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the Serpent Man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off." Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. "All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the Serpent Man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers." Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. "Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean." "Hand over what?" Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. "Kid, don't play dumb with me. The Serpent Man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing." Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. "Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there?" Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. "Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu?" Gu Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Gu Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D-rank awakened. This guy might even be C-rank already. Did he come alone, or? Gu Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Gu Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. "Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C-rank. More than enough to handle you." C-rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying Serpent Man, a C-rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. "Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. "Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Gu Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. "Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now." "That's more like it." Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Gu Chen to lead the way. Gu Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Gu Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Gu Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Gu Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. "That kid, you're pretty quick." Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. "That move just now, was it a spatial ability?" "Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now?" Gu Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Gu Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. "Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements." It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. "How I knew it was you, kid." Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, "Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do?" But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chen's spine. He countered, "Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it." Gu Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. "Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off." Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone." He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. "All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers." Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. "Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean." "Hand over what?" Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. "Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing." Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. "Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there?" Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. "Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu?" Gu Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Gu Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D-rank awakened. This guy might even be C-rank already. Did he come alone, or? Gu Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Gu Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. "Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C-rank. More than enough to handle you." C-rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C-rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. "Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Chen to lead the way. Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now was at a spatial ability. Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. How I knew it was you, kid. Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do? But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Chen's spine. He countered, Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it. Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off. Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers. Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what? Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing. Listening to his rambling, Chen finally spoke up slowly. Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there? Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu? Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D-rank awakened. This guy might even be C-rank already. Did he come alone, or? Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C-rank. More than enough to handle you. C-rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C-rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Gu Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Gu Chen to lead the way. Gu Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Gu Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Gu Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Gu Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now, was it a spatial ability? Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Gu Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Gu Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. How I knew it was you, kid. Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do? But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chen's spine. He countered, Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it. Gu Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off. Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers. Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what? Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing. Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there? Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu? Gu Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D rank awakened. This guy might even be C rank already. Did he come alone, or? Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C rank. More than enough to handle you. C rank. Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Chen to lead the way. Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now, was it a spatial ability? Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. The broadcast echoed on a loop, its sound traveling far into the silent night sky. In previous years, the expeditionary force would typically set out only 2 to 3 times, annually 3 at most. Yet this year it was only March, and they were already preparing for a second expedition. Something was indeed out of the ordinary. Chen pondered this silently. The expedition to the Hepping Plains had just returned in defeat 2 months prior. To mobilize forces again so quickly, could it be that there was something there that the nation was determined to claim? Passers-by on the street halted one by one, murmuring amongst themselves. Chen and his 2 companions also stopped, listening quietly. Another expedition. Ran Wenwen frowned slightly, complaining softly. Life is hard enough as it is. With expeditions happening every few days, they'll probably raise taxes again. If this keeps up, I dread to think how many people will go hungry. A trace of concern laced her voice, clearly reflecting her thoughts on the struggles of the common folk. Gutong, however, pouted and whispered, last time I saw the expeditionary force return, many were carried back, lying on carts, missing arms and legs. It was terrifying. A flicker of fear crossed the young girl's face. Chen patted Gutong's shoulder to comfort her, then mused, perhaps there's a strategic resource or vital geographical position on the Hepping Plains that we must secure. Otherwise the nation wouldn't rally its forces again so swiftly after a recent defeat. His perspective on matters always seemed to delve deeper than most. So let's hope this time goes smoothly, Ran Wenwen sighed. The 3 continued walking and chatting about the broadcast, the atmosphere gradually lightening. Just then a flurry of hurried footsteps sounded from behind, accompanied by a slightly panicked girlish voice. Out of the way. Please, out of the way. Chen and the others instinctively turned to look. A nimble girl was dashing towards them at full speed, waving her arms to signal them to clear the path. Not far behind her, a burly man seemed to be chasing after her, cursing loudly. Gu Chen's gaze sharpened as he focused on the scene. Wasn't this the girl named Wang Jiai he had saved in the alleyway a few days ago? How had she gotten herself into trouble again? Wang Jiai clearly spotted Gu Chen in the crowd as well. A look of pleasant surprise lit up her slightly disheveled face, as if she had found a lifeline. She shouted, "It's you." Before she even finished her sentence, she had rushed to Gu Chen's side like a gust of wind, grabbing his arm tightly. Panting heavily, she pleaded with a hint of tears, "Brother Gu Chen, save me. Please save me." Gu Chen furrowed his brow slightly. He wasn't some benevolent bodhisattva. There was no reason he had to help this girl every time she got into trouble. But with her clinging to his arm, and those big, watery eyes full of desperation, the soft spot he couldn't harden was touched once more. "What's going on now? What happened this time?" Gu Chen asked softly, unable to resist. Wang Jiai pointed at the burly men catching up behind her, explaining rapidly, "I teamed up with that guy to hunt in the uninhabited zone yesterday. We agreed to split the spoils equally, but that jerk only offered me a quarter of the money. I was so furious that I took all the money we earned while he wasn't looking. Now he's chasing me for it." As soon as she finished speaking, the burly man reached them, pointing at Wang Jiai and cursing, "You little wretch. Hand over the money right now, or I'll break your legs today." Wang Jiai refused to back down. Instead, she clung even tighter to Gu Chen's arm, lifting her chin defiantly and shouting at the man, "This is my husband. He's an extremely high-level awakener, way stronger than you. Try and take it if you dare. Your husband." The man eyed Gu Chen suspiciously, a mix of disbelief and wariness in his gaze. Indeed, the status of a high-level awakener could intimidate many in these times. Gu Chen felt a wave of speechlessness. This girl was certainly quick to climb the social ladder, already assigning him the role of husband. Regardless, he couldn't be bothered to argue with her now. He didn't seek trouble, but he wasn't afraid of it either. Since Wang Jiai had pleaded before him, and this was clearly a case of her being bullied, he couldn't just stand by idly. "Friend, that's enough." Gu Chen's voice was calm. Without any grand gesture, he merely shifted his form slightly. In the next instant, he appeared before the burly man like a phantom, nearly face to face. The man felt his vision blur as a sharp, imposing aura rushed towards him. Startled, he involuntarily staggered back 2 steps, his heart pounding wildly. A master's skill is known the moment they act. This speed was definitely not something he could afford to mess with. Half of the money she took was rightfully hers. The other half I'll have her return to you. Gu Chen beckoned to Wang Jiai. "This matter ends here, agreed." The man looked at the money Wang Jiai handed over, then at Gu Chen's gaze. Grinding his teeth, though reluctant, he weighed the pros and cons and accepted the money, muttering, "You're something else," before turning and leaving. The commotion came to an end. Gu Chen turned around, looking at Wang Jiai, who was still clinging tightly to his arm, and said helplessly, "All right, the problem is solved. You can let go now, right?" Ran Wenwen and Gu Tong curiously sized up the girl who had appeared out of nowhere. Especially upon hearing her earlier claim of, "This is my husband," Ran Wenwen's gaze turned noticeably complicated. Unexpectedly, Wang Jiai not only refused to let go, but also rubbed her head against Gu Chen's arm, blinked her big eyes, and said in a near coquettish tone, "No way. Brother Gu Chen, you've saved me twice now. This must be fate arranged by the heavens. For saving my life, I shall dedicate myself to you. I want to marry you to repay your immense kindness." Gu Chen was utterly dumbfounded by her words, nearly choking on his breath. This girl, was her brain wired differently from normal people's? "What nonsense are you spouting?" Gu Chen said, caught between laughter and tears. "I'm already married. I have a wife." As he spoke, he deliberately glanced at Ran Wenwen beside him. Unexpectedly, Wang Jiai waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that's nothing. Our country has regulations. Capable awakened are allowed to take multiple wives, and it's perfectly legal." Gu Chen's forehead veins twitched. This girl was truly uninhibited and wild at heart. He took a deep breath, striving to remain calm. "I can't afford to keep you. And don't use that life-saving grace demands repayment by marriage excuse. Tell me, what's your real motive?" He refused to believe anyone would repay a debt so eagerly in this world. Under Gu Chen's relentless questioning, Wang Jiai's playful demeanor finally receded. She lowered her head, fidgeting for a long while before murmuring, "I'll tell you the truth, but promise you won't get angry." Seeing Gu Chen nod, she continued, "I'm already 20 years old, and I must be married within 6 months. I've been searching these past 2 years, but every man I encountered either coveted my body and tried to take advantage of me, or saw my combat ability and wanted to use me to earn money in the forbidden zones. Not one of them was sincere. I'm terrified that if I don't find the right person within 6 months, I'll be forcibly married off to some vile man and ruined. Brother Gu Chen, you're the first person who helped me without asking for anything in return. And I genuinely have deep feelings for you. Ever since I was little, I've dreamed of marrying a heroic figure who descends from the heavens to save me in my hour of peril, just like in the storybooks. You are my hero." As she spoke, Wang Jiai's eyes reddened, and her voice grew choked with emotion. Her pitiful, on the verge of tears appearance stirred sympathy in both Ran Wenwen and Gu Tong. Gu Tong tugged at Gu Chen's sleeve and whispered, "She's so pitiful." Ran Wenwen also let out a soft sigh and gently urged, "Honey, since she said all this, why don't you take her in? Our home would be livelier with another person." Her words surprised even Gu Chen. Seeing this, Wang Jiai's eyes lit up. She quickly pulled 2 oil paper-wrapped pastries from her small bag, handed them to Ran Wenwen and Gu Tong respectively, and said with honeyed sweetness, "Thank you, sisters. Please do put in a good word for me with brother Gu Chen. I can endure hardship and work hard. I'll also go to the forbidden zones to earn money. I won't be a freeloader, and I can help share the family's burdens." "Hey, I'm not your sister. I'm his younger sister." Gu Tong blushed at being called sister and quickly waved her hands in explanation. Ran Wenwen accepted the pastry, a complex smile flickering across her face. In her heart, she harbored her own private thoughts. That night, she had sensed that Gu Chen was left wanting. He had stopped clearly out of consideration for her, fearing her body couldn't handle more. If she had another sister, perhaps it would truly help share the burden and better attend to Gu Chen's needs. At this thought, her gaze toward Gu Chen carried a trace of tacit approval. "Honey, why not take in this sister?" "Brother, I think this sister is really pitiful." Gu Chen looked at the 3 women's gazes fixed upon him. What more could he say? Sigh. Gu Chen let out a long sigh, feeling that this whole affair had come about too suddenly and was frankly somewhat incomprehensible. But looking at Wang Jiai's hopeful eyes, he finally nodded and said with resignation, "Fine, fine. You win." So that meant. He agreed. Wang Jiai's tears transformed instantly into laughter. She jumped up excitedly and threw her arms around Gu Chen's other arm. "Yage, wonderful. You're the best husband. And you two are wonderful too, sister and sister-in-law." And so the trio became a quartet, continuing their stroll toward the park. Along the way, Gu Chen subtly probed into Wang Jiai's family background. He learned that the girl was an orphan alone in the world since childhood, raised on the charity of neighbors. She only managed to scrape by after awakening her powers, but she had always wandered alone without a fixed home. Her tales of scavenging for food in the ruins, fighting stray dogs for leftover scraps, and brawling bloody over a single steamed bun left Ran Wenwen and Gu Tong sighing with pity, their eyes glistening with tears. Gu Chen, however, felt little emotion. The stories even sounded familiar. Because when he had taken care of little Tong, his own life had been no better than what Wang Jiai described. Perhaps even worse. In this world, who wasn't struggling just to survive? The small park was sparsely populated. Under the dim yellow streetlights, the group strolled casually. Wang Jiai quickly hit it off with Gu Tong, chattering away endlessly. Her lively, cheerful nature breathed fresh energy into the quiet night. By the time they returned home from their walk, it was already late. With a new member joining, sleeping arrangements naturally had to be made. The house had few rooms, so Wang Jiai was temporarily assigned to share a room with Gu Tong. Gu Chen, meanwhile, took Ran Wenwen back to their own room. After washing up, Ran Wenwen sat at the desk, spread open her textbooks, and actually began doing homework. In the dim lamplight, her focused profile appeared exceptionally serene and beautiful. Gu Chen didn't rush her. He lay down on the bed, first hands clasped behind his head, quietly watching her. This girl, she was truly a diligent student. Even at a time like this, she never forgot her studies. After what felt like an eternity, Gu Chen's eyelids were growing heavy when finally he saw Ran Wenwen close her book and let out a long, relieved breath. "Done." Gu Chen's voice carried a hint of excitement. Ran Wenwen nodded, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush in the lamplight. Gu Chen sat up in one swift motion and reached out his hand. "Then, time to rest, my dear wife." Ran Wenwen's heart skipped a beat at his words, her face growing even warmer, yet she obediently placed her hand in his. Gu Chen pulled her onto the bed and drew her into his embrace. The light went out, and the room was once again plunged into a dark, intimate haze. In the next room, Wang Jiai and Gu Tong lay side by side on the bed, yet neither could fall asleep for a long time. In the darkness, Wang Jiai nudged Gu Tong and whispered, "Xiao Tong, do husband and sister Wenwen make this much noise every night?" Gu Tong blinked in the darkness, seemingly long accustomed to it. She replied softly, about that. Every night they're together, there's quite a commotion." "Oh my." Wang Jiai clicked her tongue. "Then, what time do they usually settle down? I can't sleep at all." She covered her ears, feeling her own little heart beating in rhythm with the sounds from next door. Gu Tong stared at the pitch-black ceiling, pondering seriously, then said uncertainly, "Probably around 3 in the morning." 3, eh? Wang Jiai's mouth formed a perfect O shape, her face a mask of disbelief. She suddenly fumbled on the nightstand, found a tissue, carefully tore it apart, and rolled it into 2 small paper balls, reaching toward Gu Tong's ears. "Hey, what are you doing?" Gu Tong started hastily dodging away. "Shoo." Wang Jiai made a hushing gesture. "Stuffing your ears. You're still a kid. Eavesdropping on this sort of thing isn't right." Gu Tong muttered rebelliously under her breath. "Well, aren't you listening with your ears pricked up too?" "That's different." Wang Jiai declared with utmost confidence. "I'm an adult, and I'm about to become your brother's wife. Me listening is called advanced preparation. You're different. You're his biological sister. You shouldn't be hearing this kind of stuff. I was not eavesdropping. Gu Tong retorted, puffing out her cheeks. The soundproofing is just terrible. Besides, I'm almost an adult too. Almost doesn't count. The two bickered and wrestled playfully in the darkness, keeping their voices low so as not to disturb the room next door. Before they knew it, the night had deepened, and the four of them, each carrying their own thoughts, drifted off into a hazy slumber. Early the next morning, Gu Chun was roused by the morning light streaming in through the window. He opened his eyes feeling refreshed and invigorated. Despite the long night before, his spirits were unexpectedly high. Beside him, Ran Wenwen was still fast asleep, her long lashes casting a faint shadow beneath her eyes, a slight smile playing at the corners of her lips, as if she were lost in a pleasant dream. Gu Chun gently pressed a kiss to her forehead before carefully getting up. After washing up and changing, he walked into the living room, where Wang Jiai and Gu Tong were already awake. Gu Tong was helping Wang Jiai comb through her somewhat disheveled long hair, the two speaking in hushed tones, their atmosphere harmonious. "Brother, you're awake," Gu Tong called out sweetly upon seeing Gu Chun. Wang Jiai turned around, her eyes sparkling as she looked at him, filled with anticipation and a hint of shyness that stirred something in Gu Chen's heart. This girl, dressed in clean clothes with her hair neatly arranged, truly had a certain innocent charm reminiscent of the girl next door, though her spirited and untamed nature remained unmistakable. Wenwen is still sleeping. We'll wake her when it's time. Tong Tong, you and Wenwen will head to school as usual today, Gu Chun instructed, then turned to Wang Jiai. You come with me. Wang Jiai immediately straightened up like a soldier awaiting orders. Yes, husband. Gu Chen's mouth twitched at her address. This girl certainly adapted quickly. After a simple breakfast, Ran Wenwen also stirred awake, her eyes languid and alluring, which sent another surge of warmth through Gu Chen. He reminded Ran Wenwen and Gu Tong to be careful on their way to school, then left the house with Wang Jiai. Where are we going, husband? Wang Jiai followed closely at Gu Chen's side, curiously observing their surroundings. The morning streets were sparsely populated. Gu Chen glanced at her and said calmly, to take care of some business. He mused inwardly that although this girl was a bit loud and excitable, she was undeniably skilled and utterly devoted to him. At least that was how it appeared for now. Since Ran Wenwen had given her consent, having an additional ally was beneficial. In this world, more hands meant more strength, and besides, he now had the capacity to care for more people. The two arrived at the entrance of the Marriage Administration Bureau. Wang Jiai immediately understood the purpose of their visit, and her heart swelled with joy. As a D-class awakened, Gu Chun enjoyed certain privileges. For instance, he was legally permitted to have 4 wives. Having married Ran Wenwen, he still had 3 slots remaining. The paperwork went exceptionally smoothly. The clerk in charge seemed quite accustomed to the polygamous arrangements of awakened individuals, only performing the standard procedural inquiry before Wang Jiai signed. At that moment, Gu Chun looked at Wang Jiai with a serious expression and asked in a deep voice, Wang Jiai, I ask you one last time. Have you truly thought this through? Once we are married, as the one marrying in your own, 3 slots for male spouses will be frozen. Unless we divorce in the future, you cannot marry another man. Do you understand? He felt it necessary to state the facts up front. He didn't want any complications arising from this later. Some female awakened preferred not to marry, but to take several husbands instead, enjoying the feeling of being doted upon and attended to. Listening to Gu Chen's words, Wang Jiai's playful expression gradually faded. She lowered her head, seemingly pondering seriously for a moment. Gu Chen didn't urge her, waiting patiently. He hoped Wang Jiai had truly considered this thoroughly, not acting on a whim. After a few seconds, Wang Jiai suddenly lifted her head. I've made up my mind. I've decided you're the one for me for life. Those slots mean nothing to me. As long as I can be with you, I'm completely content. Her tone was resolute without a hint of hesitation. Her bright eyes shimmered with hope for the future and deep affection for Gu Chun. Looking at her like this, Gu Chen couldn't help but feel a pang of emotion. This girl, seemingly carefree, was actually quite the romantic. He nodded and said to the clerk, We've both made up our minds. The clerk nodded, said no more, and quickly completed the procedures. A brand new marriage certificate was handed to Wang Jiai. She clutched the red booklet, beaming like a child who had just received candy, her eyes crinkling into slits. Gu Chen's certificate was replaced with a new one, now bearing the photos of 3 people. As they exited the Marriage Administration Bureau, Wang Jiai was still immersed in joy, repeatedly flipping through the certificate, occasionally letting out a silly giggle. Gu Chun shook his head helplessly at her lack of composure, yet a strange feeling stirred within him. Being so wholly relied upon and trusted by someone, it wasn't a bad feeling at all. Just as the two descended the steps, a girl suddenly approached from the side. She appeared to be around 17 or 18, looking like a student still in school. She wore a faded, slightly loose short-sleeved shirt and a similarly washed-out short skirt. 2 braids hung playfully over her shoulders, and a worn straw hat with a brim pulled low covered most of her face. The girl seemed not to notice Gu Chun and the others, walking quickly with her head down. As she brushed past Gu Chun, she suddenly seemed to remember something. She turned on her heel, hurried back, and thrust a flyer into his hand. Sir, please support us. Oppose the abuse of alien beasts and strive for peaceful coexistence with them. Give them a chance to live and give us humans a chance as well. The girl's voice carried a note of urgency. Gu Chun glanced at the flyer, which displayed some blurry images of alien beasts and a few eye-catching slogans, all typical calls for peace and against slaughter. He raised an eyebrow and quipped, "Peaceful coexistence. Miss, tell me, how do you coexist peacefully with those creatures that lunge at people and bite the moment they see them? They can't understand human language. We can't even communicate with them." He found it amusing that such naive people still existed in this day and age. Probably some sheltered flower who had never witnessed the brutality of the wilderness. The girl seemed taken aback by Gu Chen's bluntness, but she quickly raised her voice in rebuttal. "How can we know it's impossible without trying? Humans coexist peacefully with dogs and cats. Why not with alien beasts? They are lives too. The first step is to free all those imprisoned alien beasts and return their freedom to them. I believe they will remember our kindness. If we continue this endless slaughter, humanity will eventually be exhausted." The girl's voice carried a fervent, almost fanatical zeal, her eyes gleaming with the light of idealism. Gu Chun couldn't help but let out a chuckle at her words. He gestured at the surrounding buildings and said slowly, "Do you know why the outer 7th district still has electricity to light your way and buses for the citizens to travel? That's because there are thousands of electric rats in the power station outside the city constantly generating electricity. If they were all released, what do you think would happen to this city? The entire power grid would collapse. At night, you wouldn't even be able to turn on a light." The girl was rendered speechless by Gu Chen's words. She opened her mouth as if to retort, but found no words to say. After a long pause, she finally spoke with a hint of uncertainty. Before humans generated electricity without spirit beasts. We can do it again now." Gu Chun let out a soft sigh. This young girl was still too naive, too idealistic. The laws of survival in this world were far crueler than she could imagine. Gu Chun shook his head, took Wang Jiai's wrist, and prepared to leave. This kind of argument was meaningless. "Sir, please wait," the girl called out urgently as Gu Chun was about to leave. "Our Symbiosis Society is holding a promotional gathering this weekend at Silvermoon Park. If you're free, you should come and learn about our ideals." Gu Chun stopped, turned around, and looked at her with calm eyes, his tone carrying an imperceptible hint of pity. "Miss, I used to work at the power plant. To be honest, coal resources are nearly exhausted and solar panels can't sustain the entire city's electricity. Right now, the city largely relies on those electric rats to keep running. It's still the same question. If they were all released, what would you use to get by? Generating electricity with love." The girl froze and placed the light in her eyes, dimming, as if Gu Chen's words had shattered some firm belief in her heart. Gu Chen said no more and turned to leave with Wang Jia. Some realities can only be understood by crashing into them headfirst until you're bruised and bleeding. Wang Jia had been quietly following Gu Chun the whole time, and now she muttered softly, "Is there something wrong with that girl's head? Releasing spirit beasts. If those things got out, she'd be the first one they'd eat." Gu Chun gave a faint smile. "Youth is reckless. They always think they can change the world. They'll understand once they've hit enough walls. Come on, walk with me to the market. We're having dinner at Wenwen's parents' place tonight, and I can't show up empty-handed." Wang Jiai's eyes lit up at once. "Great. Honey, what should we buy? How about some spirit beast meat?" She looked excited, as if contributing to the household was a glorious thing. Gu Chun was amused by her. Just buy some normal ingredients. The two arrived at the nearby market, which was fairly lively with various stalls lined up in rows selling all sorts of goods. Gu Chun brought Wang Jiai to a meat stall. "Boss, give me 2 gene of pork belly with some fat and lean mixed," Gu Chun said. This kind of farm-raised pork wasn't cheap, so Gu Chun didn't dare buy too much. Once their days improved, he could properly buy more for his in-laws. He then took Wang Jiai to a nearby general store, buying a small basket of eggs and a box of sealed milk. Eggs provide protein, and the milk was for Ran Wenwen's younger brother to help his health. Wang Jiai watched Gu Chun skillfully select goods and pay a gleam of admiration flashing in her eyes. This man was not only powerful, but also so adept at household chores. The more she looked, the more she liked him. She silently resolved to take good care of the household in the future, to share the burden with Gu Chun and not let him worry about such trivial family matters. That evening, when Ran Wenwen returned from school, the sky was still bright. Gu Chun had her change clothes and then took her out, leaving Wang Jiai and Gu Tong at home. Before leaving, he specifically reminded Wang Jiai not to boss Gu Tong around all the time, as Gu Tong still had homework to do. Wang Jiai patted her chest and promised she would treat her sister-in-law like her own sister. Gu Chun found her expression amusing. Ran Wenwen looked at the pork belly, eggs, and milk in Gu Chun's hands and asked softly, "Honey, are all these for my family?" Her face carried a hint of unease and shyness, as if she felt a bit embarrassed. Gu Chun grinned, freed one hand to ruffle her hair, and said in a relaxed tone, "Of course. It's my first formal visit to my father-in-law and mother-in-law. I can't show up empty-handed, right? Besides, your parents raised you into such a fine young lady, and now you're with me. I've gotten the better end of the deal. Bringing a few things is nothing. His words were casual, but they warmed Ran Wenwen's heart. Her eyes reddened slightly, her nose tingled, and she nodded heavily, her voice carrying a barely audible choke. Gu Chen felt a pang of tenderness seeing her like this. All right, lead the way. I don't know where your house is. Ran Wenwen's tears turned into a smile, and she reached out to take the box of milk, saying, let me carry this. Her emotions were complicated at that moment. She both hoped Gu Chen would win her parents' approval and feared that her hot-tempered father might make things difficult for him. Finding a good partner in this world wasn't easy, and she didn't want family matters to affect Gu Chen's opinion of her. The two squeezed onto a rickety bus, the cabin filled with the smell of sweat, but they were both used to it. More than half an hour later, the bus stopped at an area that looked relatively orderly. The sight before them was rows of neatly planned flat-roofed houses. Gu Chen looked around. The living environment here was indeed much better than his own. At least the roads were clean, and there was a small shop nearby, making daily purchases much more convenient. My dad used to be a chef, and he was pretty good, so our family was doing all right in the early years, Ran Wenwen said softly, as she led the way introducing her family's situation. It's just that my two younger brothers aren't very ambitious. They didn't do well in school, and went out to find work early. My parents used a lot of connections to arrange decent jobs for them, spending all the family savings. That's when things started getting tight. Then my second brother had an accident at the factory, damaged a machine, and the factory demanded a huge compensation. That made things even worse, and we ended up owing a lot of debt. Gu Chen listened quietly, getting a general picture. Every family has its own troubles. Ran Wenwen's family situation was a microcosm of many ordinary households. Along the way, neighbors greeted Ran Wenwen warmly, their eyes curious as they glanced at Gu Chen beside her. It seemed Ran Wenwen was well liked in this area. She pointed to a flat-roofed house with a light on not far ahead, and said quietly, see, that's my home. Gu Chen nodded, thinking about how to speak to make his father-in-law happy. Before they reached the door, the faint sound of an argument came from inside the house. A somewhat gruff male voice shouted angrily. You two little brats. All you do all day is cause trouble for me. You can't even handle the smallest things. Can't you learn from your sister and give me some peace of mind? Then a younger male voice, equally heated, retorted, but weren't you the ones who forced sister to marry? If it weren't for you, would sister have suffered so much? Then a female voice, I wonder how Wenwen is doing now. Is she eating well? Is she dressed warmly? If you're so worried, why did you marry her off? The gruff male voice sounded again, even more hostile. Don't worry. That girl must have found herself a better life, living comfortably and forgetting all about her old parents. If she dares to come back, I'll give her a beating. Hearing these words, Ran Wenwen's face turned pale in an instant, and her footsteps faltered, her eyes brimming with hurt and unease. Gu Chen looked at her like this and sighed inwardly. This man he thought was someone with a sharp tongue but a soft heart. He had said that only to keep the woman from worrying, but the blade of his words was a little too sharp. Gu Chen reached out, gently squeezing Ran Wenwen's cold hand to reassure her, then stepped forward and knocked on the door. Knock, knock, knock. The argument inside abruptly ceased. Soon the door creaked open from within. A middle-aged woman with fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes stood there, tear stains still fresh on her face. Seeing Ran Wenwen at the door, she froze for a moment, then gasped and covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling up again. Wenwen, you? Why are you back? Immediately after, a burly middle-aged man with a fierce look pushed his way to the door. Seeing Ran Wenwen, he frowned, then began to curse. You ungrateful girl, you finally remembered to come home. What, couldn't make it out there? Run out of money and came back to beg? I'm telling you, stop dreaming. There's no money for you here. Ran Wenwen's eyes reddened at his words, and she protested. Dad, what are you saying? I brought my husband to see you both. She still felt shy saying the word husband, and her voice trailed off. Only then did the people inside notice the young man standing behind Ran Wenwen, carrying gifts. The man stood tall and straight with clear, handsome features. Though simply dressed, he carried himself with a composed and steady demeanor. The middle-aged man's gaze swept over Gu Chen and the items they carried. His anger and harshness eased slightly, and his tone softened, though still tinged with awkwardness. Oh, well, what are you standing out there for? Come and have a seat. Two boys of 13 or 14 inside also hurried over, curiosity on their faces. They deftly took the bags from Gu Chen and Ran Wenwen, calling out enthusiastically to Gu Chen, "Hi, brother-in-law." Gu Chen thought to himself that these must be Ran Wenwen's younger brothers. The middle-aged man gestured for Gu Chen to enter, pointing to a worn-out sofa. The house was small, but kept reasonably clean. What's your name? Where do you work? The middle-aged man poured himself a glass of water and began his interrogation. Gu Chen sat down calmly, neither servile nor overbearing. Hello, Dad. My name is Gu Chen. I've recently awakened as an awakened and am currently on duty with the garrison. He deliberately mentioned his status as an awakened, knowing it carried significant weight these days. It was to prevent his wife's family from looking down on him and causing one any distress. Sure enough, upon hearing the word awakened, the middle-aged man's expression shifted. The scrutiny lessened, replaced by surprise and a hint of worry. He paused thoughtfully before speaking. An awakened, huh? That's a dangerous line of work. The uninhabited zone is perilous. You must be extremely careful and stay sharp. You're a family man now. You can't just live for yourself anymore. Chen nodded seriously and replied earnestly, "You're right, Dad. I'll remember that." At this point, Ran Wenwen introduced everyone to Chen. Her father was Ran Libo, her mother Chen Yulan, and her two younger brothers Ran Haodong and Ran Haoshi. "What are you standing there for? Yulan, hurry up and fry a couple more dishes and set out some extra bowls. Haodong, Haoshi, put the things away and get ready to eat." Ran Libo gestured grandly, starting to bustle about. The house was a bit bigger than Chen's small place. Though simply decorated, it at least had a small, dedicated dining area, unlike Chen's place where he had to make do with a small table in the living room. The six of them sat around a modest square table, a little cramped, but it lent the scene a warm, familial atmosphere. The dishes were served quickly, not lavish, but clearly prepared with care. The pork belly Chen had brought was transformed by Chen Yulan into a large plate of fragrant, glistening braised pork that immediately whetted the appetite. During the meal, Ran Haodong and Ran Haoshi, clearly full of curiosity about their new brother-in-law, kept pestering him with questions. Brother-in-law, are there monsters everywhere in the uninhabited zone? Brother-in-law, have you ever killed a monster? Are you super strong? Chen patiently shared some general information about the environment in the uninhabited zone, but glossed over his encounters with beasts, simply saying he was mainly on patrol and hadn't had any real confrontations yet. He didn't want to plant unrealistic fantasies in these two boys' minds. If they got a wild idea and rushed off to the uninhabited zone, it would be a disaster. Ran Libo meanwhile chimed in from time to time, sharing so-called survival tips for the uninhabited zone he'd picked up from who knows where. Whether they were useful or not, Chen maintained a respectful, attentive posture. As the meal went on, Ran Libo started asking about Chen's income. When he learned that Chen was still mainly relying on the meager patrol allowance from the garrison, he immediately put on a stern face and said with a hint of reproach, "Don't take this the wrong way, but if money's tight, you shouldn't have bought so many things this time. What a waste. You're the head of the household now. One relies on you, and there will be many expenses ahead. You need to learn to budget and plan your finances carefully." Chen knew his father-in-law was concerned for him and also mindful of the money. He quickly smiled and nodded in agreement. "You're right, Dad. I'll be more careful from now on." His natural, sincere agreement eased the expression on Ran Libo's face further. When a plate of vibrant stir-fried bamboo shoots with pork was brought to the table, Chen took a bite. The shoots were tender and crisp, the pork savory and fragrant. He couldn't help but nod in appreciation. "Mom, this bamboo shoot dish is delicious. The bamboo shoots have a wonderful flavor." Chen Yulan's face lit up with a smile. "Eat as much as you like. These shoots were a gift from one of your father's old friends. We usually save them for special occasions. Your father specifically asked me to cook them today." Chen felt a flicker of surprise. "Are these bamboo shoots?" "Very precious." Ran Libo took a sip of his drink, set down his chopsticks, and explained, "In the city, all the land is used to grow grains and raise livestock. Things that fill bellies. There's no room left to cultivate things like this. When something is rare, it becomes valuable. Fresh bamboo shoots like these are a scarce commodity in the city, so the price naturally goes up. Regular folks can't afford them, and there's no point in spending a fortune on them anyway." Chen listened, a thought flashing through his mind. He set down his chopsticks and said, "Dad, that reminds me of something. In a dense forest in the uninhabited zone, I think I saw quite a few of these wild bamboo plants. The shoots were growing thickly. Do you think we could harvest some and sell them in the city to make some money?" Ran Libo's eyes lit up sharply at the words. Having been a chef by trade, he possessed a keener sense than most when it came to the value and market for ingredients. "Absolutely. Chen, are you being serious? If there really are bamboo shoots, that's a promising source of income. I work in a restaurant, and if you can get them, I can help you make connections. Finding buyers won't be a problem at all." The two Ran boys, hearing of a potential way to make money, perked up, as well crowding around to ask for details. Chen, observing this, had already formed a plan in his mind. "Next time I get a chance to go back to that area, I'll keep an eye out. Dad, besides bamboo shoots, are there any other ingredients that are scarce in the city, but might be found on the fringes of the uninhabited zone?" Ran Libo's enthusiasm was further ignited by this question. He immediately had Ran Haoshi fetch pen and paper, and recalling from memory, quickly jotted down a list. It included items such as wild mushrooms, field fungus, wild hairs, and even some special wild vegetables. As long as you can get these things fresh and in good condition, they'll sell like hotcakes in the city. Especially the big restaurants. They love using such rare finds to show off their class. Ran Libo promised, thumping his chest. Through this exchange, Gu Chun could sense a palpable shift in the Ran family's attitude towards him. The earlier scrutiny and politeness had transformed into genuine warmth and familiarity. Ran Libo in high spirits sent Ran Haoshi to the corner store to buy 2 bottles of decent liquor, insisting on sharing a few drinks with Gu Chun. Watching Gu Chun engage in lively conversation and toasts with her father and brothers, Ran Wenwen sat nearby, a gentle smile playing on her lips, her eyes brimming with happiness and contentment. This man had not only given her a stable life, but had also quickly earned her family's approval and even brought a new source of income to the household. She felt incredibly fortunate. After several rounds of drinks, the atmosphere grew even more animated. Midway, Chen Yulan pulled Ran Wenwen aside into a small room for a private chat. Wenwen, don't blame your mother for being hard-hearted back then, for forcing you to marry early and hurrying you out of the house. Chen Yulan clutched her daughter's hand, tears flowing again. It was just so hard for the family at that time. You know your father's temper, he was just barely holding on. I had no other choice but to take that step. After you left, I couldn't eat or sleep, worried sick that you were suffering out there. Your father even scolded me several times for rushing you out like that. Hearing her mother's tearful confession, Ran Wenwen couldn't hold back her own tears. Mom, I don't blame you. I know how difficult it was for the family. I understand. The mother and daughter embraced, crying together, releasing all the grievances and worries that had been pent up over the past days. Ran Libo, hearing the commotion from outside, poked his head in and feigned annoyance with a shout. What's all this crying for? Today is a happy day. Our son-in-law is here for the first time. Don't you two spoil the mood. Wipe your tears and come out to eat and drink. Though his words were gruff, they carried a clumsy sort of concern which lightened the atmosphere in the room considerably. After a satisfying meal and drinks, the night had grown deep. Seeing how late it was, Gu Chun stood up to take his leave with Ran Wenwen by his side. Ran Libo and Chen Yulan insisted on seeing them to the door. Chen Yulan even went to the kitchen and brought out 2 jars of homemade pickled radish, pressing them into Ran Wenwen's hands. Take these home to try. Your father made them himself. They're tasty and go great with rice. Ran Wenwen accepted them without protest. The Ran family walked them all the way to the end of the alley. On the way, they ran into a few neighbors, and Ran Libo proudly introduced them. This is my son-in-law, Gu Chun. A D-class awakened. The pride in his voice was unmistakable, as if he wanted the whole world to know he had such a capable son-in-law. Hearing that he was a D-class awakened, the neighbors cast envious and admiring glances, showering the Ran family with praise for finding such a fine son-in-law. The feeling of being noticed and flattered made Ran Libo's smile even brighter. Gu Chun and Ran Wenwen waved goodbye and walked side by side towards home. Back inside the Ran household after the couple had left, Ran Haodong, looking at the messy table and recalling the envious looks from the neighbors, couldn't help but speak up. Dad, Mom, how about we scrape together some money and let me and Haoshi try to awaken too? What if we can also become awakened? Ran Haoshi chimed in eagerly. Yeah. If we become awakened, we can also go to the uninhabited zone to make money. Before the words even died down, Ran Libo smacked Ran Haodong on the back of the head, glaring. In your dreams. Do you think awakening is that easy? What if you fail? And even if you succeed with your impulsive nature, you'd be nothing but a snack for those beasts out in the uninhabited zone. Stay put, both of you, and work in the city. Don't go dreaming about nonsense. Chen Yulan also chimed in. Yes, your father is right. Being an awakened is too dangerous. I don't want anything to happen to you too. Our family's life will get better gradually. The Ran parents held a rather conservative and disapproving stance towards becoming awakened. It was precisely for this reason that Ran Wenwen had been so resistant and desperate when faced with the forced marriage allocation, terrified of being chosen by Gu Chun and awakened. But fate was fickle. She was chosen by him and became his wife. And now it seemed the outcome was far better than she had ever imagined. It was 10 o'clock at night and the darkness was thick and impenetrable when Gu Chun and Ran Wenwen finally arrived home. As soon as they entered, they saw Gu Tong and Wang Jiai sitting side by side on the old sofa in the living room, heads together, whispering about something. Seeing them return, the 2 girls broke into relaxed smiles. It seemed the 2 girls had really hit it off. Bro, Sister Wenwen, you're finally back. Gu Tong called out cheerfully, pulling Wang Jiai to her feet, as if ready to head to their rooms for the night. She had previously called Ran Wenwen's sister-in-law, but with another sister-in-law now in the picture, the title had become confusing, so she had reverted to calling her by name. Unexpectedly, Ran Wenwen reached out and gently pulled back Wang Jiai, who was about to follow Gu Tong towards the secondary bedroom. Turning her head, she looked at Gu Chun with tender affection. Honey, I've been sitting all afternoon and my bones are aching. I think I'll go sleep with Xiao Tong. With that, she gently pushed Wang Jiai's hand towards Gu Chun, then affectionately linked her arm with Gu Tong's, and with a smile, led the bewildered girl into the secondary bedroom, closing the door behind them. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. How I knew it was you, kid. Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, "Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do?" But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chen's spine. He countered, "Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it." Gu Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. "Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the Garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off." Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. "All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead Garrison soldiers." Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. "Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what?" Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. "Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the Garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing." Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. "Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there?" Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. "Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu?" Gu Chen could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Gu Chen needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D-rank awakened. This guy might even be C-rank already. Did he come alone, or? Gu Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Gu Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. "Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C-rank. More than enough to handle you." C-rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C-rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. "Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. "Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Gu Chen felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. "Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now." "That's more like it." Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Gu Chen to lead the way. Gu Chen took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp, and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Gu Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Gu Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Gu Chen felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. "Heck, kid, you're pretty quick." Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. "That move just now, was it a spatial ability?" "Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit Unresponsive now, Gu Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Gu Chen, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements. The two arrived at the boundary between Outer Sector 7 and the uninhabited zone. After presenting their transcendent identification, Gu Chen and Wang Jia walked side by side through the isolation gate. The view before them opened up dramatically, no longer the oppressive cramped structures of the city, but rather crumbling ruins and rampant vegetation. At your current rank, you should still need to assist with patrols for the garrison, right? Gu Chen turned his head to look at Wang Jia, asking casually. Wang Jia nodded, brushing a strand of hair blown across her forehead by the wind. But I've already been patrolling for over a year. Now I only need to return to Outer Sector 9 to assist for 2 days a month. Next time I go back, I'll request a transfer to Outer Sector 7. From now on, this place will be your home. Gu Chen replied non-committally. He led Wang Jia towards the direction of the skyscraper wall, but before they got close, he veered off into the dense jungle beside it. Honey, didn't you say your patrol area was that tall mountain ahead? Why change direction here? Wang Jia asked, puzzled. Gu Chen pushed aside obstructing branches and leaves as he explained. The skyscraper wall area is the regular patrol zone, too crowded and conspicuous. No need to join the fray there. Most of the ingredients Ran Libo listed yesterday weren't rare exotic herbs. They were simply scarce in the city due to limited land and severed transportation links. In the relatively pristine environment of the uninhabited zone, these things shouldn't be hard to find if one paid attention. Sure enough, before long, Gu Chen spotted a large patch of vividly colored wild mushrooms on a shaded patch of humus soil. A flicker of joy crossed his heart, and he signaled Wang Jia to stop. Are these the things? Wang Jia looked at the mushrooms, somewhat uncertain. In her past understanding, the only valuable things in the uninhabited zone were the blood and pelts of aberrant beasts, certain special ores, or leftover valuables and animals from the old era. She had never really paid much attention to these plants. That's right, don't underestimate these, they're hot commodities in the city. As he spoke, Gu Chen took a cloth bag from his backpack and began carefully picking them. With the first discovery made, the subsequent search went much smoother. One by one, they found all the wild vegetables and mushrooms listed. Unfortunately, apart from these plant-based ingredients, they hadn't seen a single trace of the small animals, like wild rabbits, that Ran Libo had mentioned. Gu Chen frowned slightly. Logically, an area this lush with vegetation should have plenty of small animals. How is it we haven't encountered a single one? He voiced his confusion. Wang Jia thought for a moment before speaking. Maybe they've been hunted to near extinction by other transcendents. As you know, most transcendents entering the uninhabited zone rarely venture far from the restricted area into the deep interior. Their main purpose isn't to kill those powerful aberrant beasts. That's too dangerous. Most people just hunt animals within this quarantine belt, skin them, get some meat, and exchange it for money. Like me, before I mainly hunted animals or searched abandoned buildings for supplies left by humans and scavenged the corpses of victims, hoping to find something useful. But these plants, unless they're particularly rare medicinal herbs, no one pays them any attention. Upon hearing this, Gu Chen suddenly understood. So that's how it was. The edges of this uninhabited zone were like ground repeatedly plowed over by countless transcendents. Any animal of value had long been cleaned out. Conversely, these inconspicuous wild vegetables and mushrooms, because they were ignored, thrived luxuriantly, benefiting him. It seemed this was indeed a promising business opportunity. At least before others caught on, he could rake in a substantial profit. This trip's yield far exceeded Gu Chen's expectations. The several large cloth bags they had brought were all stuffed to the brim, and Gu Chen also carried an even larger one on his back, filled with the finest mushrooms and some wild vegetables. Wang Jia wasn't idle, either holding 2 heavy bags in her hands, a hint of excitement on her face. This feeling of getting a bountiful harvest purely through gathering was a first for her. Come on, let's head back. Gu Chen judged that time was about right. If they stayed any longer, the sky would darken. The danger level in the uninhabited zone at night was far higher than during the day. The two returned the same way they came, once again arriving at the isolation gate of Outer Sector 7. The garrison soldiers on duty couldn't help but sweep their gazes back and forth several times over Gu Chen, Wang Jia, and the bulging bags on them that looked ready to burst. They had been on duty here for a long time. Every day, anywhere from 80 to 100 transcendents passed through the isolation gate, but seeing people like Gu Chen and the others coming out carrying and hauling so many unidentified objects was truly a first. After all, most transcendents would consider themselves lucky to return with a small bag of aberrant beast materials or a few useful pieces of scrap. Who would have thought they'd come back looking like they had just ransacked a supermarket? This unusual sight naturally also attracted the attention of some transcendents who were preparing to enter or exit the isolation gate or resting nearby. For a moment, several probing and curious gazes fell upon Gu Chun and Wang Jiai. Sure enough, before Gu Chun and the others had even walked far, a man with a sharp monkey-like face shamelessly sidled up and struck up a conversation with Gu Chun. "Hey brother, quite a haul you've got there. All stuff full like that, what's the good stuff?" This fellow looked like he deserved a beating, clearly not a good character. People like him were the most common everywhere, specializing in opportunistic and bullying tactics. Gu Chun couldn't be bothered to even lift his eyelids and said flatly, "Nothing much, just picked up some worthless junk." The sharp-faced man obviously didn't believe him. His small eyes stared fixedly at the bulging bags on Gu Chun and Wang Jiai, his Adam's apple bobbing as he said with a greedy smile, "Brother, aren't you being a bit modest? Look at you two with all these bags, almost like you're moving house. How about letting your brother here have a look? This is the garrison's territory in broad daylight. You don't think I'd rob you, do you?" As he spoke, the man tried to lean in, seemingly wanting to poke at Gu Chun's bag. "I'll say it one more time," Gu Chun said, shifting his body slightly to effortlessly dodge the reaching hand. "Don't touch my things. Otherwise I'll consider it an attempted robbery and respond in self-defense." The sharp-faced, scrawny man froze. He had assumed Gu Chun was an easy target, never expecting such a firm attitude and unyielding resolve. In the past, a mere display of ferocity was enough to cow these young men into submission. He never went too far, of course, just enough to extort a few favors before backing off. "Kid, you've got some nerve, huh?" The sharp-faced man let out a sinister chuckle, backing away as he pointed a finger at Gu Chun. "Watch your step out there from now on." Gu Chun paid him no mind. Those who sought wealth through crooked means were a dime a dozen, but the ones who truly thrived were always ruthless and shrewd. A coward like this, who only blustered near the isolation gate and sized up his victims, wouldn't dare to actually throw a punch. Ignoring the man, Gu Chun took Wang Jiai's hand and strode forward. "Honey, are we sure we don't need to worry about him?" Wang Jiai whispered, a hint of concern in her voice. Gu Chun didn't slow his pace, his tone steady. "Don't worry, he's all bark and no bite." Gu Chun led Wang Jiai toward the Ran family residence. He figured this herb-gathering task would likely become a regular affair. Since Wang Jiai could freely enter the uninhabited zone, having her learn the routes and familiarize herself with the process would allow her to handle the job independently whenever he was away on patrol or occupied with other matters. As for how the Ran family might perceive this arrangement, Gu Chun didn't give it a second thought. It was perfectly normal for an awakened to have multiple wives. As long as he treated Ran Wenwen well and was devoted to the Ran family, his father-in-law Ran Libo seemed open-minded, and his mother-in-law Chen Yulan was even more reasonable. Ran Wenwen herself didn't mind, so her parents certainly wouldn't raise any objections. Ultimately, strength and attitude were what mattered. The two arrived at the Ran residence carrying several large bags brimming with ingredients. "Knock, knock, knock." Gu Chun rapped on the door. It was his mother-in-law Chen Yulan who answered. Ran Libo apparently hadn't returned yet. "Xiao Chen, coming quickly." Chen Yulan's face lit up with a warm smile the moment she saw him. When her gaze fell upon Wang Jiai, she paused briefly before asking, "And this is a..." "Mom, this is Wang Jiai, my newly wedded wife." "Wenwen has already agreed," Gu Chun replied calmly. Chen Yulan said nothing more, warmly ushering them inside to take a seat. She even poured a cup of water for Wang Jiai with an affection that rivaled how she treated her own daughter. Wang Jiai, quick-witted and sweet-tongued, addressed her as Auntie, with such charm that Chen Yulan beamed with delight. Gu Chun nodded approvingly to himself. Things seemed to be progressing well. Setting the heavy bags of ingredients against the wall, Gu Chun clapped his hands. "Mom, this is today's harvest. Take a look. Is the quality any good?" "I don't know much about it." Chen Yulan walked over, untied a bag, and peered inside. She nodded with satisfaction. "It's indeed good, very fresh." She turned and retrieved a small package wrapped in oil paper from the kitchen, handing it to Gu Chun. "These are freshly made mung bean cakes. Woman has loved them since she was a child. Take them back for her to try." Gu Chun accepted the package. It was still faintly warm, and a subtle sweet fragrance wafted to his nose. He understood perfectly well. His mother-in-law was clearly hinting that he shouldn't neglect his old flame now that he had a new one. Gu Chun flashed a grin, revealing a row of white teeth. "Mom, don't worry. I'll make sure these mung bean cakes reach Wenwen, and no one else will touch them." Chen Yulan was amused by his earnest demeanor and playfully wagged a finger at him. "You silly boy, what nonsense are you talking? We're all family now. Eat them whenever you like, no need to be so particular. If you enjoy them, I'll make more next time." Her words warmed Gu Chun's heart. His mother-in-law truly treated him as one of her own, and she had also indirectly accepted Wang Jiai. That would be wonderful. I'll be looking forward to your cooking next time, Mom." Gu Chun seized the opportunity. After a bit more casual chatter, he noticed the time was getting late and rose to take his leave. As for how much today's batch of ingredients would fetch, that would only be known after Ran Libo returned and delivered the goods to the restaurant to settle the account. By the time they got home, dusk had fallen. Gu Chun and Wang Jiai set about preparing dinner. Before long, Gu Tong and Ran Wenwen returned from school one after the other. The dinner atmosphere was warm and cozy. After the meal, Wang Jiai and Ran Wenwen whispered together in the bedroom for quite a while. When they emerged, Ran Wenwen cast a slightly flushed glance at Gu Chun and murmured, "Honey, tonight I'll keep you company." Wang Jiai added matter-of-factly, "We've agreed. One day, each taking turns." "That's fair." Gu Chen's heart swelled with delight at the words. Look at that. His wives were so considerate and thoughtful that they'd already arranged everything themselves, leaving him with nothing to worry about. He was tempted to interject, why bother dividing things so meticulously? They were all family, and the bed wasn't exactly small. Why not just squeeze all three together? But the thought merely flickered through his mind before he swallowed the words. One must eat bite by bite and walk step by step. There was no rush. In a few more days, once they grew more familiar and their bond deepened, it would naturally come to pass. Gu Chun chuckled inwardly. He knew that day would come sooner or later. That night was naturally all too brief, with warmth and softness held in his embrace. Though Ran Wenwen was gentle and reserved by nature, she possessed a certain allure in intimate matters that left Gu Chun utterly captivated. Early the next morning, Gu Chun rose refreshed and full of energy. Today, as usual, he was to take Wang Jiai to the edge of the uninhabited zone to gather wild vegetables. With the experience from yesterday, the two moved with greater skill and efficiency. As dusk fell, they once again arrived at the Rand family home, carrying bulging bags. Chen Yulan was home again. "Mom, today's haul," Gu Chun said, setting the bags down. "Oh, good, good." Chen Yulan chuckled in response, then pulled a stack of dragon coins from her pocket. She counted out 400 yuan notes and handed them to Gu Chun. "This is for yesterday. Your father negotiated with the restaurant. We sold everything for 500. The restaurant took their cut, leaving us with 100 for the family, and the remaining 400 is yours." Gu Chun took the money, quickly calculating in his head. 400 a day meant 12,000 a month, far more than the meager allowance from the garrison. After a moment's thought, he pulled out one of the 100 yuan notes and pressed it back into Chen Yulan's hand. "Mom, you keep this." Chen Yulan was taken aback and quickly tried to refuse. "Oh, Xiaochen, what are you doing? I can't take your money." "Mom, that's not right," Gu Chun insisted, pushing the money back firmly. "If it weren't for Dad's help, where would I have found this opportunity to make money? This is Dad's connection. I'm just putting in the effort. You take it, consider it my way of honoring you and Dad. Besides, we're family. If you're this polite with me, are you treating me like an outsider?" Hearing this, Chen Yulan was deeply moved and comforted. After a few futile attempts to refuse, seeing the determination in Gu Chen's eyes, she finally accepted the money. A wide smile broke across her face, and she patted Gu Chen's arm. All right, Mom, we'll take it, Mom, we'll take it. You're such a sensible boy, Xiaochen, so much better than that girl Wenwen." Earning such praise from his mother-in-law filled Gu Chun with a sense of pride. Bidding farewell to Chen Yulan, Gu Chun and Wang Jiai walked home side by side. On the way, Wang Jiai swung her empty bag, her face alight with excitement. "Honey, at this rate, we're netting 300 a day. That's a substantial amount." Gu Chun hummed in agreement, feeling quite pleased himself. "Yeah, that's 9,000 a month. With my 2,000 allowance from the garrison, we're comfortably clearing 10,000 a month. And besides," Wang Jiai added, "this work is easy. It's like we're just out sightseeing and strolling around making money while we're at it. It's not dangerous at all, so much easier than hunting down those mutated animals." Gu Chun wholeheartedly agreed. This kind of low-risk, high-reward venture was a rare find. He still had a batch of goods in his storage space that he could sell for a sum, but the time wasn't right to cash them out just yet. Before they knew it, the time for the rotation patrol had arrived again. Gu Chun rose early, had a light breakfast, kissed his two beloved wives goodbye, and tousled Gu Tong's hair, telling her to be good at home. Only then did he leave, heading for the camp of Squad 78. The sunlight seemed unusually harsh today, casting an unsettling glare that made him feel uneasy, as if something was about to happen. The camp was bustling with figures, just like any other day. Captain Wu, with his usual official air, stood on the platform, drilling the teams heading out on patrol with the same old warning: safety first, report any anomalies promptly, and so on. As the teams dispersed to prepare for departure, Captain Wu walked over to Gu Chen, a friendly smile plastered on his face. He reached out and gave Gu Chen's shoulder a hearty pat. "Shall Gu, be careful out on patrol." Gu Chen put on a look of flattered surprise and responded quickly, "Thank you for your concern, Captain Wu. I'll be careful." When had this man become so concerned about him? Could he have misjudged him? Was Captain Wu the type to let bygones be bygones, not one to hold a grudge? After exchanging pleasantries, Gu Chun took his leave. As per usual, patrol teams would split up once they left the camp, each heading freely to their designated area. Because of the earlier incident in the mine tunnel area, the other team members chose to take detours to avoid it, leaving Gu Chun to walk the path alone, which suited him just fine. Upon reaching the vicinity of the mine, Gu Chun didn't rush to enter. Familiar with the terrain, he climbed up the towering tree he had used for cover before, found a sturdy branch, adjusted himself into a comfortable position, and closed his eyes. He had worked hard the night before to finish his studies for the next 2 days, and he needed to catch up on some sleep. He slept soundly until the sun was high in the sky. A low growl from his stomach roused him. Gu Chun stretched lazily and pulled a lunchbox from his storage space. The meal had been prepared by his two wives, fragrant white rice topped with a layer of glistening braised pork skin and a few vibrant green sautéed vegetables. Ever since their recent stroke of good fortune, the standard of their meals had improved considerably. Now they could have meat with every meal. Ran Wenwen and Wang Jiai's cooking had gotten better and better. Gu Chen ate with utter satisfaction, even using the rice to wipe the last bit of sauce from the box. After eating his fill, Gu Chun let out a satisfied burp, leaned back comfortably against the tree trunk, and cast his gaze toward the mine entrance not far away. A nagging doubt had been bothering him. Logically, with so many garrison soldiers dead in the mine, it was a major incident. The higher-ups couldn't possibly have ignored it. Yet from the time he returned until now, everything had been eerily calm. Even Captain Wu had been courteous to him this morning, acting as if nothing had ever happened. What was going on? Had Captain Wu not reported the Snake Man incident? Or did the garrison high command also fear the Snake Man's power, unwilling to send people for a deep investigation, and simply wanted to suppress the whole affair? After much deliberation, he concluded that the latter was more likely. Some officials preferred to avoid trouble altogether, especially a cowardly group like the garrison, which only bullied the city folk and feared death. They wouldn't want to provoke a powerful mutant beast that could easily annihilate a whole squad. After thinking it over for a long time, Gu Chen still felt uneasy. He decided to go in and check again, at least to confirm the situation inside. He carefully slid down from the tree and crept quietly to the mine entrance. The entrance was still deep and dark. Gu Chen paused at the opening for a moment before turning on his flashlight and stepping inside. This time he was much more composed than last time, his pace quicker. After several twists and turns, he soon arrived at the familiar chamber. The dark lake was still as calm as a giant black curtain, not a single ripple on its surface. The skinned Snake Man corpse still lay there alone, but it looked even more shriveled and horrifying with the passage of time. Gu Chen's gaze swept across the water's surface for a moment. A faint ripple like an illusion gently spread out, and then vanished without a trace. He frowned slightly, looking away from the water. But in the next second his pupils constricted sharply. The remains of the garrison soldiers that had been scattered near the Snake Man's corpse were gone. All that was left on the ground were a few patches of dried dark red bloodstains and some tattered pieces of clothing. A sense of foreboding instantly enveloped Gu Chen's heart. He immediately realized that things here were not as simple as he had thought. Almost instinctively, he turned to retrace his steps. However, just as he turned around, a figure silently appeared at the narrow passage leading outside, blocking his escape route. A playful smile on his face, the figure slowly stepped out from the shadows into the chamber, one deliberate step at a time. It was none other than Captain Wu who arrived. "How I knew it was you, kid." Captain Wu squinted his eyes, his voice laced with a hint of smugness, as if everything was within his grasp. Gu Chen's heart sank, but he maintained a composed expression on his face. Steadying himself, he asked with feigned confusion, "Captain Wu, what do you mean by this? What is it that you intend to do?" But at this point, even a fool could see that this old fox had been plotting against him all along. Captain Wu didn't answer directly. Instead, he offered a gentle smile that sent a chill down Gu Chen's spine. He countered, "Xiao Gu, don't be nervous. I'm just curious as to how you managed it. That serpent man was no pushover. I've crossed paths with it before, and I was no match for it." Gu Chen's mind raced. It seemed Captain Wu was convinced he had killed the serpent man. After a moment of thought, he spoke with a mix of truth and lies. "Captain Wu, you must be joking. When I arrived, the serpent man was already on its last legs, too weak to move, lying on the ground. It seemed it had fought to a stalemate with the garrison brothers. I just got lucky and took advantage of the situation. It didn't take much effort to finish it off." Captain Wu listened, nodding occasionally, a look of understanding dawning on his face. That makes much more sense. I thought so. There was no way a D-rank awakened like you could take on a B-rank beast alone. He shifted his tone, dropping all pretense and stating his purpose directly. "All right, kid, let's not beat around the bush. Hand over everything you took from the serpent man and the belongings of the dead garrison soldiers." Gu Chen's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained a bewildered look. "Captain Wu, I don't understand what you mean. Hand over what?" Captain Wu's face darkened instantly, his voice turning cold. "Kid, don't play dumb with me. The serpent man's scales, its essence, blood, and the garrison soldiers' gear are worth a fortune. I saw you leave the camp empty-handed with my own eyes, and you haven't been back near here since. The stuff must still be around here, hidden somewhere, right? I'm actually curious where you stashed it. I've searched several times and found nothing." Listening to his rambling, Gu Chen finally spoke up slowly. "Captain Wu, by the rules, anything hunted or found unclaimed in the unowned zones belongs to the one who finds it. There's no rule saying it must be handed over, is there?" Captain Wu snorted, stepped forward, and swept his gaze over the cave with a sinister look. "Kid, rules are rigid, but people are flexible. It's true there's no rule for handing things over. But if someone were to die out here in the wilderness under unclear circumstances, the higher-ups wouldn't bother to investigate following standard procedure. You get what I'm saying, Xiao Gu. Gu Chun could clearly hear the naked threat and intimidation. A flicker of tension rose within him as his mind worked at full speed. For Captain Wu to confront him so openly, he must have been fully prepared. The most crucial thing Gu Chun needed to figure out now was Captain Wu's strength and whether he had any accomplices. To be a squad leader, one had to be at least a D rank awakened. This guy might even be C rank already. Did he come alone, or? Gu Chen's gaze subtly flickered behind Captain Wu. As if reading Gu Chen's thoughts, Captain Wu let out a mocking laugh, interrupting his speculation. Kid, stop guessing. It's just me here. As for my strength, I'll tell you directly. I'm C rank. More than enough to handle you. C rank. Gu Chen's heart tightened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. This Captain Wu was indeed not to be underestimated. Unlike the severely wounded dying serpent man, a C rank awakened at full strength presented an overwhelming level of suppression for him. Moreover, since this guy dared to show up alone, he must be prepared for a fight. His chances of winning were slim. No, he couldn't fight head-on. Gu Chun gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay calm, and squeezed out a pained expression. Captain Wu, since we've laid our cards on the table, I won't hold anything back. I can hand over the goods, but let's split it 50-50. How about that? 50-50. Captain Wu laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke, his hefty belly shaking. Kid, do you not understand the situation? Right now you're the one begging me. I get 80%, you get 20. Looking at Captain Wu's smug, overbearing face, Gu Chun felt a surge of rage within him. But he put on a helpless expression and sighed. Fine, 80-20 it is. Captain Wu, I'll take you to get the stuff now. That's more like it. Captain Wu nodded with satisfaction, signaling Gu Chun to lead the way. Gu Chun took a deep breath and turned towards the passage he had come from. At the very moment he passed by Captain Wu, his eyes turned sharp and his right hand, which had been hanging at his side, suddenly whipped forward. A faint tearing sound cut through the air as a long sword gleaming with cold light materialized in his hand. Like a venomous snake striking from its hole, it slashed directly towards Captain Wu's neck. This strike was as fast as lightning, its force like a thunderbolt. However, just as the blade's edge was about to touch Captain Wu's skin, Gu Chen's movement came to a bizarre halt. The long sword hung suspended in midair, a mere hair's breadth away from Captain Wu's neck. A sinister grin spread across Captain Wu's face. He calmly raised his right leg and delivered a swift side kick, slamming viciously into Gu Chen's chest and abdomen. Boom! Gu Chun felt a tremendous force hit him, sending him flying backward to crash against the hard cave wall with a dull thud. A sweet coppery taste rose in his throat, and he nearly spat out blood. He struggled to his feet, staring in shock at his right hand, which was still frozen in the sword-swinging position, completely immobile. Heck, kid, you're pretty quick. Captain Wu leisurely brushed off some non-existent dust from his clothes, a cat-and-mouse grin on his face. That move just now was at a spatial ability. Not bad. But tell me, doesn't your right hand feel a bit unresponsive now? Gu Chen stared intently at Captain Wu, his gaze icy cold. His right hand was definitely Captain Wu's doing. But how had he managed it? Was it his ability? He hadn't sensed a thing. Captain Wu paced over to stand before Gu Chun, looking down at him arrogantly. Kid, my ability is called neural resonance. Simply put, I can channel my power into your body and directly control your motor nerves, allowing me to manipulate your physical movements.